We will call for the introductory recording, please.
Before we begin the agenda, the Wichita-Sedgwick County Metropolitan Area Planning Commission and the Wichita-Sedgwick County Board of Zoning Appeals would like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to this public hearing. For those in attendance, copies of the agenda for today's meeting, the public hearing procedure, and planning department staff reports on all agenda items are available in the lobby. The Planning Commission and the BZA's bylaws limit the applicant on a zoning, subdivision, or variance application and his or her representatives to a total of 10 minutes of speaking time at the start of the hearing on that item, plus up to 2 minutes at the conclusion of that hearing. All other persons wishing to speak on agenda items are limited to 3 minutes per person. However, if they feel that it is needed and justified, the chairman may extend these times by up to 2 minutes. All speakers are requested to state his or her name and address for the record when beginning to speak. When you are finished speaking, please share your name, address, and the case number on the sheet provided in the room. This will enable staff to notify you if there are any additional proceedings concerning that item. All speakers at the podium, please remove your face mask before speaking into the microphone. Please note that all written and visual materials you present to the commission and the board will be retained by the secretary as part of the official record. If you are not speaking, but you wish to be notified about future proceedings on a particular case, please provide your contact information to the planning department. The Planning Commission and the board are interested in hearing the views of all persons who wish to express themselves on all the agenda items. However, we ask that all speakers please be as courteous and concise as possible and avoid long repetitions of facts or opinions which have already been stated. For your information, the Wichita City Council has adopted a policy for all city zoning. A copy of this policy is available from the planning staff. The City Council relies on a written record of the Planning Commission hearings and does not conduct its own additional public hearings on these items. The decision of the BZA is final. Any appeal of a decision of the BZA is to the district court.
Thank you. Today, I'm going to, commissioners, shake things up just a little bit, and we're going to start by calling the Board of Zoning Appeals to order. So I'm opening the Board of Zoning Appeals business and would ask for a roll call of commissioners in attendance, please.
Certainly. Fox.
Present.
Duel.
Here.
McKay.
Here.
Green.
Here.
Bill Johnson. Bill Johnson is absent. Blick.
Here.
Nix.
Here.
Foster.
Here.
Warren.
Here.
Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson. Mr. Johnson is showing up as being online, participating virtually. Okay. Well, we see that he's there. We'll see if he speaks up. Miles.
Present.
Hartman.
Here.
Aldridge.
Here.
Williams Bay.
Here.
Show 13 members present if we count Mr. Joe Johnson.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, I bring your attention to the agenda. It includes the meeting minutes approval, but we did not receive those minutes in our packet. And the BZA case 2023-18 was withdrawn by the applicant. So I would accept a motion to defer the meeting minutes to our next scheduled meeting.
Second.
Motion from Commissioner McKay, second from Commissioner Green. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. Motion passes 13-0. We'll defer minutes to the next scheduled BZA meeting. And I now adjourn this BZA meeting. Thank you. Now, welcome to the May 11th meeting of the Metropolitan Area Planning Commission. We've already called our roll. We have received minutes of 2 previous meetings. I'll start with minutes for the April 13th, 2023 meeting.
Move for approval.
Have a motion for approval and a second. Any discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And that was Hartman and Blick, by the way. Any opposed? Nay. Minutes of the April 13th meeting are approved as submitted. Minutes of the April 27th meeting were also in your packet. Any discussion?
Move for approval.
Motion from Commissioner Hartman, second from Commissioner Green. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. Motion passes. And we have one abstention, Unix, so motion passes 12-0-1. 12-1-0. Excuse me. 12-0-1. 12-4. Nobody against. One abstention. All right. Now, thanks for the. Oh yeah. Here we go. Next, we will go through the agenda for this meeting and identify any of the cases we can take by consent. This doesn't mean that we're not paying attention to them. It means that we've discussed them at subdivision or advanced plans meeting and will not further hear them here. So, item subdivision 2023-00012. This case has been requested by the applicant to defer to the next meeting, which I believe is June 8th. So we will not address that item today. Public hearing items, there are 2 vacation items. Vacation item 2023, quadruple 09, located near Webb Road and 37th North. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? And seeing none, does anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? Vacation 2023, quadruple 09. We'll take that item on consent. Item 3.2, vacation item 2023-00010, located between 263rd Street West and 231st Street West, just south of US 254 or US 54. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? We'll take 3.2 on consent. That ends the vacation items.
Motion to approve 3.1 and 3.2.
Motion from Commissioner Blick.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Williams-Bay. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion passes 13-0. Moving on to the public hearing items. The first item, 4.1, conditional use 2023-00010. We are recommending denial, so we will hear case 4.1 or item 4.1. Item 4.2, conditional use 2023-00011, located near Woodlawn and 17th Street North. Is there anyone on the commission who would like to hear this case?
Yes.
Okay, we will hear 4.2. Item 4.3, conditional use 2023-00012, located at 2431 East Mount Vernon Road. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Is there anyone in chambers who would like to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone participating virtually who would like to hear this case? 2431 East Mount Vernon Road. We'll take item 4.3 on consent. Item 4.4, Community Unit Plan 2023-00013 and zoning case 2023-00019. The staff is recommending something different than the applicant is open to, so I would recommend we hear this case. Is the applicant or agent present? Okay. And was the agent for 4.1 and 4.2 present? Okay, very good. Yes?
We're getting an indication from the agent for the CUP case that they may be in agreement. So it
Okay,
might
so
be
we should
worth
go
going
through the case. Okay.
through just to avoid having to hear it if
All
they
right.
are in agreement.
Very good. So I will go back to item 4.4. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case, 53rd Street North and North Meridian Avenue? CUP and zoning. Does anyone in chambers want to hear this case? And does anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? I'm withdrawing my statement that there was disagreement. Okay. No one virtually, so we could take 4.4 on consent. Item 4.5, zoning case 2023-00016, located at Mount Vernon Road and west of South Washington Avenue. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? This is item 4.5. Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone participating virtually want to hear this case, 726 East Mount Vernon. Hearing none, we can take 4.5 on consent. Item 4.6, zoning case 2023-00017, located at 45th Street North and North Webb Road. Does anyone on the commission want to hear this case? Anyone in chambers want to hear this case? Seeing none, anyone participating virtually want to hear this case? Hearing none, 4.6 will be taken on consent. Item 4.7, zoning case 2023-00018, located at Hydraulic and 55th Street South, 1306 East 55th Street South. Anyone on the commission want to hear this case?
Yes.
Okay, we will hear 4.7. And item 4.8, regarding the short-term rental, we will hear that case.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve items 4.3, 4.4, 4.5, and 4.6.
I have a motion from Commissioner Green.
Second.
Second from Commissioner Blick. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor indicate by an aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Motion passes 13-0. That brings us back to the top of the agenda. Conditional use 2023-00010, and we'll ask Christina please to come forward for the staff report.
Good afternoon, everyone. Christina Reith, Associate Planner with the Metropolitan Area Planning Department. This is case number CON 2023-00010. The applicant is requesting a conditional use for group residence limited on a property zoned SF5 single-family residential located at 7000 East Stonegate Lane. According to the applicant's website, the Ivy Foundation operates sober home living facilities. And these are similar to a group home, which in this case can accommodate up to 8 persons who are not related by blood or marriage and can occupy a residence. The request for a conditional use in this case is for group residence limited, which would allow the facility to house up to 15 persons, including staff. The site plan submitted by the applicant shows a 3-car garage and a driveway with 3 parking spaces. Since the staff report was written, they have submitted an administrative adjustment to allow parking within the front setback as long as it's within 8 feet of the property line. The subject site is located on the interior portion of the neighborhood. It's far from the arterial streets, and so it is planning staff's opinion that the requested conditional use for this particular location may have detrimental impacts on the surrounding properties due to an increase in traffic and increase in parking requirements, which are out of character with the neighborhood. The conditional use request is in partial conformance with the Community Investments Plan. The 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept Map identifies the site as residential, which reflects the full diversity of residential development densities and types typically found in an urban municipality. The requested conditional use is not in conformance with the land use compatibility locational guidelines. The general guidelines state higher intensity development should be discouraged from locating areas into areas of existing lower intensity development, particularly established low density residential areas. Group Residence Limited is allowing up to 15 persons, including 2 staff members, in the interior of a single family residential neighborhood. The scale of this type is of residential use is out of character with the existing surrounding uses. The number of residents who could drive versus the number of on-site parking requirements may be detrimental to the character of the neighborhood. The other thing we looked at was public services, particularly public transportation. Wichita Transit provides regular bus service within 1/4 mile southeast of the subject site at the northeast corner of East 13th Street North and North Governor Road. So it's a little bit over 1/2 mile from the subject site. So even if the occupants didn't have cars, public transportation is a little bit less accessible here. The requested conditional use is in conformance with the goals of the Wichita Places for People plan. The requested group residence partially aligns with one of the strategies called Strategy 5, provide a diversity of housing options to attract new residents and allow existing residents to remain in the established central area. However, the scale of the development is out of character with the neighborhood. Based on the information available prior to the public hearing, MAPD staff recommends that the application be denied. When you look at the golden rules, the first one talks about the zoning, uses, and character of the neighborhood. It is planning staff's opinion that the requested conditional use for this particular location may have detrimental impacts on the surrounding properties due to an increase in traffic and increase in parking requirements. If we skip down to number 3, the extent to which removal of the restrictions will detrimentally affect nearby property. It is staff's opinion that it could have detrimental impacts on the character of the neighborhood, such as aforementioned increased traffic, and an impact on the aesthetics of the neighborhood due to the increased parking requirements. We skip down to number 6, relative gain to the public, health, safety, and welfare compared to the loss in value or hardship imposed upon the applicant. Approval of the request could have detrimental impacts on the surrounding residents, such as increased traffic. Denial could be regarded as a loss of opportunity, economic opportunity and enjoyment for the applicant. Lastly, opposition or support from the neighborhood residents. At the time the staff report was prepared, staff received several comments in opposition to the proposed conditional use via telephone and email. These comments are submitted. I submitted some to you guys via email, some are attached to the end of this report, and some which came in after Monday are the packets on your table. Should the MAPC find that the conditional use be approved, it is recommended that the MAPC adopt alternative findings supporting the recommendation. Staff recommends the following conditions. 1, the conditional use approval is limited to a maximum of 15 persons, including staff members. 2, they must submit a revised site plan illustrating that they satisfy the parking requirements. 3, that no signs shall be allowed except those under the city sign code, 4, the site shall be developed and operated in compliance with all federal, state, and local rules and regulations. And lastly, if the zoning administrator finds that there are any violation of these conditions, the zoning administrator, in conjunction with the planning director, may declare the conditional use is null and void. This went to the District Advisory Board, District 2 on Monday, and it was approved by the DAB. With the condition that it would allow a maximum of 12 persons, including staff. And let's go to the site photos here. So this is looking north towards the site. Next slide. Oh, this is looking east away from the site. You can see where the road starts to bend around and it's on the interior of the neighborhood. Next slide, please. This is looking directly south away from the site. Next slide, please. And this is looking west towards, away from the site. Next slide, please. And those are all my site photos. And with that, I will stand for questions.
We have questions for staff at this point.
Just a quick one.
Commissioner Green?
The DAB approved it, did you say 12?
With a maximum of 12, including staff members.
Including staff, not
Yes.
plus staff, including staff. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not, we would call the applicant or agent to come forward, please. You have 10 minutes, and please start with your name and address from the podium, please.
Hello, my name is Ivory Kaufman. My address is 448 North Windham Road, Wichita, Kansas, 67219. Ivy Home Foundation. I am the owner and operator. I began Ivy Home Foundation because I saw a need in Wichita for more sober housing and of a different sort. I traveled to multiple different cities, Dallas, Richmond, Seattle, to see what kind of housing they were offering for the sober community. I attended a NAR conference, and that is the standard that I use and follow for my sober houses. That's the National Association of Recovery Residences. Kansas is not an affiliate of NAR, but I choose to follow that standard. So that's just part of who I am as a business person, and it's also why I'm applying for the permit. With that said, I am completely separate from Oxford or Hemingway or what are some of the other ones we have in Wichita? Those are the ones that are most commonly known. My men's house is full, and my women's house is close. If you are keeping tabs on what is happening across the nation, but also in Wichita, it's heartbreaking. The death in fentanyls, it's rising, and it's going to keep going up. But with that, we're also seeing an increase in the number of people who are moving to sobriety, and Oxford houses, Hemingway, as well as Big Fish Bail Bonds has some houses, and Wichita Bail Bonds has some houses. They're all full. So that is why I put forward and request an increase in my ability to house more people. This house specifically, it's 3,000 square feet, 5 bedroom, 3 bathrooms. It is not my intention to crowd people. It's why the homes I purchase are 3,000 square feet and above. But, and this is a little bit American, we like the idea of people, every child in the family having their own bedroom and every person in the house having room to spread out. But if you go back to the research that's been done by Oxford, and sober homes run well with an average of 12 people. The best sober homes have 12 people. And that took a long time to sink in for me, because at first my mindset was I will never do more than 8. You'll never see me put more than that number in a house. And it was just the more things that I read that is a number for community, for people to sharing resources, sharing cars, because typically when a person comes into sobriety, they don't have a car. Resources regarding, I know this place, this job, this. They share a lot of things. I have no idea. Okay, good, a timer running, thank you. So I model my housing, I'm a housing provider only. I am not a program. I model it off of a group in Seattle. There have been a lot of questions asked by the neighborhood about my ability to operate a house. I think some of that honestly has to do with being female and having a young face. I can provide my resume if you would like. And there have been, a neighbor went and looked up my home loans down at the Hall of Records, which is completely their right. Just so you know, my lending is secure. My home loan is not being called. And this use, this conditional use for my property in no way changes the terms of my lending. There have been questions about the number of times police have been called to my homes. I opened in January, and the police have never been called to my men's house. They were called to the women's house twice, and both of those were for a mental health visit. A female, how would you say it? A female felt like said she was going to commit suicide. She felt like she was in danger of taking her life. I could have handled it on my own, honestly, and I was handling it, but I don't know how many of you have had the chance to experience our Wichita police now. They are incredible. It is not the same policing of 20 years ago. They were so calm and quiet, and they were in and out within 5 minutes. It was gorgeous. And most of my women have experienced other women in sobriety have experienced a completely different kind of policing before they became sober. And so it was a great opportunity to get to see police in a completely different side. It was fantastic. So that's what the 2 calls were. Let's see. Yeah, and then do you have any questions for me? What do you want to know?
If we begin the questioning, then you vacate your last 3.5 minutes of presenting,
Oh.
so.
Well, I can keep going. I could tell you guys all about what I'm doing.
Or do we, if you're open to.
I have more I can share. So as an operator, I follow precise protocol in what I do. And a lot of that comes from the NAR standards that I follow. Let's see. Yeah. The neighbors are very frustrated with what they see as a lack of communication from me. I spoke with landlords and leadership in Hemingway and Oxford and this group out of Seattle, and all of them told me across the board, do not tell the neighbors anything when you open. Just open and put people in. I chose not to, because I am not Hemingway or Oxford or, they said you have a right to open. Simply open it, get whatever licensing your state requires, and move people in. And it's not who I am, so I didn't. I gave neighbors my cell phone number, my email address. I answered text messages, phone calls, and every question I answered led to more questions. And I discovered everything that was being gathered was then used to file a citation, what is it called, against me in commercial zoning. A commercial zoning violation was filed 2 different times that I provided information. I was cleared both times of the violations. And the kinds of questions that I was asked were things like, what are your house rules? What are the consequences for breaking a rule? What is your eviction process? What violations would cause an eviction? How will you ensure the safety of the neighborhood? Will you do a background check on every resident? And then probably the one that was the most galling was, we need to be provided with those background checks. And that was by 3 different people. We need to be provided with the background checks for every resident. That's all.
Thank you for your testimony. I'll open it for questions from the commission at this point, so
okay.
stay at the podium. Commissioner Green?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I do appreciate what you do. There is obviously a need in our community for this, and it is unfortunately increasing. The concern, though, that I have is the number of residents that you have in what I see, what you have said is a 5-bedroom house. Mm-hmm. Does that would be overnight stays, or is that just?
Yes, living there, yes.
So you've got, your request is 15 with including 2 staff. And that's why I wanted to find out what the DAB said
So when I applied, what I saw written was 15, was that a conditional use permit was for 15 people. I was like, okay, I guess that's what I'm applying for. My desire is, I would never put more than 12. I need a little bit of room to be able to say, I have 8, and I know these 2 people are going to be moving out in the next month. I'm interviewing 2 more people who want to move in. So I want to move these 2 people in while these 2 people are moving out, so I have 10 in the house right now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that. So the staff, are they awake all night, or would they be also staying overnight, sleeping in the house?
So this is not that kind of staffed residence. This is a group residence limited. So I have staff that also have their own jobs. So it's not staffed the same as you think of a Starkey house, where the staff is there 24/7 watching residents. It's staffed where this is the person in charge and watching over, but not, it's a different kind of staffing, which actually Christina would be very good at answering. It's a different level of staffing requirement.
Can you tell us when a staff member is physically present in the home? Because this kind of goes to parking requirements too. So what hours is there a staff member at the home?
I'd say about 20 hours a day, and I'm there the other 2 to 4.
So there's always someone there.
Yeah, there's always someone at the house.
And they're alert and awake, not sleeping also in the room, in the building.
Correct. I mean, there's times at night, though, when staff would be asleep, and that's okay. These are all adults. They're not people that need constant supervision.
I guess what I'm getting at is 5 bedrooms for a maximum would be 15. You're saying maybe 13 or 14?
12. 12 is the maximum, including staff.
Oh, okay, because that's what the DAB approved.
I believe the DAB was intending to approve 10 with 2 staff. That was their intention. Things were pretty heated and complicated at the end there when they were voting. I believe their intention was to pass a maximum of 12 people, including staff.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is how many people are in each room, and how many people in each room would be sleeping overnight. And because it just seems like it would be crowded to have that many people in a 5-bedroom house, whether it's 10 or 12 or up to 15.
So there's 3 living rooms and a kitchen and a dining room, and 2 people to a bedroom. And typically people work every kind of shift. There's 3 different shifts in the day. And so it's pretty rare that all 12 people are home at the same time, except for the house meeting, which is mandatory for everybody. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And then I guess to go further on what Ann had to say, how do you propose to address the parking concerns?
So there are 3 slots in inside the garage, which we have not been using because we haven't needed to. We've had things in there that have been stored as people have been sorting through things. So beginning to use those parking stalls in the garage, and then 3 stalls outside of that. But it's one of the things of this, I guess you would say, this demographic, that not as many have cars. One resident gets picked up for work. The bus stop being half a mile away, that's actually considered quite close for Wichita. And so they walk to take the bus or to the grocery store. And then they do a lot of ride sharing together. So I cannot guarantee this, obviously, but especially for the men's house, For about 12 people, you could expect about 6 cars.
You said 10 cars?
6.
6 cars, okay.
And then plus the staff cars coming to and from? Is that
I'm the
correct?
only staff.
Okay. I thought you said there was another staff person that
So,
took part of the time.
yes,
and
but
so
they're
one
part
at
of
a
the
time.
12.
Okay, they're one of the clients, actually.
Yes, the
Okay.
staff are residents.
Okay. Gotcha. Commissioner Aldrich, you have a question?
Yeah, I was getting a little confused on exactly how many, this separation between staff and the actual residents. So what you're saying, there's gonna be 10 residents and then 2 staff? Or are you looking at 12 residents, 2 of those would be considered staff? And, you know, exactly how many staff personnel are gonna be there 24 hours a day? If you have 2 staff people, they work in 12-hour shifts, or you're just utilizing part of the residents and designating a couple of them as staff?
There. Each house has a house leader who is given, who takes on a leadership role, and then I have a second in the house as well.
Okay, so basically, you're not gonna have anybody that is qualified or trained to be part of you're just calling it staff.
They
but they're
are
actually-
qualified
And how are they
and
qualified?
trained.
How are they trained? What kind of training do you have? And
I use a program out of NAR, and we have an online, there's so many things that you can get online now, training in trauma-informed care certifications. But yeah, and I don't know how much you know about how Oxford, Hemingway, how they operate, but it's, you vote in the next president and that's the staff.
just out of curiosity, what is the age range between your residents? Like your youngest and your oldest?
I accept anyone who is an adult above the age of 18 and above. My age range right now is 24 to 64.
Commissioner Nix, you had a question?
Yeah, earlier on in your presentation, you used the word interviewing. I'm just curious, I mean, this would speak to how safe the environment is, I suppose. So you interview people, some make the cut, some don't, I suppose. Right? Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, so a large part of the interview process, it's less about what someone says and more about their, my house leaders could speak on this more than I could, and more about their ability to be forthcoming. Do they seem open to, are they able to talk about their past? And at what point in the recovery process are they? Their body language says quite a bit. And we look into their background, do a background check. But probably the thing that matters the most is that I am extremely quick to evict someone who can't follow the rules.
Commissioner Herman, go ahead.
Is this house we're talking about, is this for the men or the women?
This is the women's house.
Okay, and on a average, how many cars are parked there at the house?
4.
I'm curious about the garage. I know a lot of people living in 3,000 square feet that can only get one car in the garage, and you mentioned that you have been using the garage for storage. Many times in a group home, the garages are also remodeled for additional living space, and you mentioned 3 living room areas.
Mm-hmm.
So is the garage free and open for 3 parked vehicles?
Yeah, it is. It's
And it would remain that way under your
it's
use
really
of
been
this
a
home?
matter of, I can be a little bit of a collector when somebody offers me free stuff. It's like, oh, free dressers. We just have to move them into the rooms.
Okay, so 3 could be used. And if we went to the slide, when the setback is variance administrative setback for the parking in the driveway, does that actually allow a car then to cross the sidewalk that
No.
goes through that area?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure of that.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the commissioners at this time? Okay, thank you, stay tight. The next portion will be public comments. So we will invite anyone present who would like to speak on this item to come forward. You can sit down, but you want to listen carefully because you'll have an opportunity to come back and respond to the concerns that are expressed at the end of all the public comments. Okay? So, I assume there are persons present who would like to speak on this item. Please make your way to the podium. Begin by giving your name and address, please. That allows us to make sure you receive information about this case as it progresses. And you have 3 minutes to make your presentation. So thank you, sir. Your name?
Hi, my name is Robert Garland. I live at 6916 East Stonegate Street, just to the west of this home.
Okay, thank you.
The public utilities in this neighborhood cannot sustain the current residents. Adding more residents would be detrimental to the city. I thank the commissioners for their concerns about what the home is operating as, but that is not your mandate. Your mandate is to be stewards of the land. Since moving to my home, I have seen multiple failures and problems of the city's infrastructure. During the year of 2022, Stonegate has seen water delivery infrastructure failure leading to property damage, water waste, and financial burden to the residents. 6913 East Stonegate experienced flooding in the yard and the street, sustained disruption to their lawn and landscaping from the repair by the city, requiring extra time and effort to maintain their property. Also in 2022, a gas delivery service failure was experienced. Residents to 6916 and 6917 had property disrupted due to the gas line leaking. The delivery line to 6916 was replaced, possibly others were replaced. I have not spoken to those residents. The lawn and landscaping needed to be repaired, not only by the gas line company, but as well as the residents themselves. The driveway, there was also a service outage due to this. We could not use the gas running to our homes. The driveway in front of 6917 was disturbed and needed to be repaired. The street in front of 6916, 6913, 6917, and 7000 were disrupted due to the processes needed to ventilate the excess gas that was leaked into the underground. We had to accommodate these repairs for a sustained period of time and could not utilize certain areas of the street for parking and experienced noise pollution, disrupting residents' sleep. If this happens again, the potential increase of cars and traffic could affect the repairs and the quality of life. The streets in front of 7000 have experienced failures. Since 2018, when I moved in, I have called and had the pothole filled 3 times due to existing traffic patterns. If the number of cars and traffic increase, that would be detrimental to the infrastructure of the street. Not only is the street in front of Lawrence Lane, a arterial street feeding this neighborhood, as well as the section in front of Coleman Middle School on 13th Street, already being slated for repairs due to the number of traffic. The sewer system can also not sustain increased residents. There is a medical services facility on this line servicing the area. I personally worked for the sewer system of Wichita for 2 years. I experienced sewer backups as well as need for maintaining the sewer line. The 50-year-old system has a potential to fail due to the ingress of roots and excess usage by residents. Particularly since this is a female house, the residents have the potential to flush feminine hygiene products.
Your 3-minute time is
Okay.
up. I think we can all imagine the rest of that sentence. And so if you could you have any thought that you were unable to express? Or are there any questions of the commissioners?
Yes.
Commissioner Foster?
These utility failures that the neighborhood has experienced, can you tell me, do you know whether the failures were of the city distribution lines out in the street, or were they on the individual service lines to individual properties?
The gas line as well as the water line were the city responsibility, or the city or the utility responsibility where they failed, not the residents. Yes, they were.
Thank you.
Any other question, Commissioner Williams Bay?
Where is your home in relationship to the?
And the other addresses you were giving, are they on the same block facing the same street?
This is 7,000, this is 6916, this is 6913, and this is 6917.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out. Any other questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you for your testimony.
May I ask one question that I was not allowed to before by the staffing?
15, 20 seconds.
Okay. Was the historical data of the existing infrastructure problems experienced, was that explored, or was it taken into consideration when the DAB or you guys are evaluating it?
Yeah, those questions will be answered in the rebuttal. Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please. I will remind you of the instructions given at the beginning of the meeting, recognizing there are a number of people who want to speak. We've heard about infrastructure issues. That was a very thorough review of that. So each successive speaker, we ask not to repeat things we've already heard about unless you have a significantly different piece of information to offer. Okay? And your name and address, please. Thanks for coming.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Poe. I live at 6913 East Stonegate. I would like to talk on the public safety aspect. I do have a background in public safety. I've worked 10 years with the city's public safety department. What I'd like to talk about is the risk and concern of the amount of vehicles and driving age individuals that will be at the house if it is granted the permission. Right now, I guess it is assumed that 4 people are there, but we can't assume that during the whole life of this property, having that many people that are of driving age are not going to be driving cars. We can do all the assuming we want, but the fact is, if there's 12 people that can drive, there could be 12 vehicles at the house. I've made calls on multiple people that have been struck by vehicles in obscured areas where the driver couldn't see somebody, and I wouldn't wish that upon any person, being the driver, the individual struck, or the family of that individual. I don't want myself, the residents, or any of the neighbors in my block to be part of that. I think from a public safety standpoint, the possibility of having 12 extra vehicles when 6 can comfortably fit within the driveway and garage is detrimental to not only the neighborhood, but the people therein and the people that walk around. And I'm open to any questions.
Any questions for the speaker? Did you have a couple slides on feet per bedroom? Did I see? Okay.
I did not.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Any questions, commissioners? Okay. Next speaker, please.
Okay, so I'm Monica Poe. I live at 6913 East Stonegate as well. The slides that were up there, I did present to the DAB in regards to just the amount of space within the house and the bedrooms, and I believe that was kind of already discussed within the commission, so I won't bring that up. But I do want to say, we understand the group home is here and it's lawfully allowed to be here in the neighborhood. We just think the addition is what is violating the golden rules of zoning changes. So any more than what is allowed by right is what the change to the zoning and uses of characteristics of the land. And we strongly recommend that you take the staff's recommended denial of the permit. So if the MAPC truly believes it is not in violation, please just take the time to consider that this has only been here since February 25th. That is the first day that residents moved in. And so it's been 2 months and 2 weeks, and we've seen 2 police calls already. While I think it's great we're utilizing city resources, I also know the strain that can put on them. And I just want to make sure that everything is taken care of before we put additional strain, as in more additional residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jianqi Chen. I have lived in 7005 Stonegate for 32 years. I'm not going to repeat what my neighbors have already mentioned, but I was kind of surprised at the DEB meeting that one of the members supporting the application mentioned to all of us that our concern for property value is just our imagination. I'm an economics professor at Wichita State, so I did some research. I would like to share with you 2 articles. One was published in the Journal of Sustainable Real Estate, using a large sample from Central Virginia to do the analysis. And 3 professors, they found out that embedding this type of house into the residential area is going to cause on average a drop of 8% of property value and of course tax value as well. And in some cases, it's 14%. Then I continue on with another research published by a very famous, prestigious National Bureau of Economic Research, NBER. That's the most prestigious research organization. Also, 3 professors found out, using Seattle as an example, and discovered that this type of house is going to decrease the property value of the surrounding home by an average of 3.4% to 4.6%. Adding this to those issues that my neighbors have already mentioned, this profit-making company has created a lot of negative external effect to the neighbors. If you have any questions?
Any questions for the speaker? At times, the professor, at times the research will give specific elements that contribute to the loss of property value as a result of an adjacent property. Was there any detail in the research about what those qualities or characteristics were that contributed?
It's a very detailed and a long research. I pass on those 2, actually 3 articles. The 3rd one is related to registered sexual offender, which will drop the value by 17%. I passed that information to Christina. You are welcome to take a look.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker, please.
My name is Dennis Murphy. I live at 706 Stonegate Street, which is the house immediately to the east of the house in question. I apologize for squinting. I had eye surgery yesterday. I have 2 points. One, what has not been mentioned yet is at the corner of Stonegate and Lawrence Lane, there was an old zoning that allowed that house to be both a residence and a business. And we've already been blindsided when we've always assumed it was a residence, when this business moved in, didn't tell us anything, and then one day opened full-blown. And now some days you go along there and there are 6 or 8 cars parked on both sides of the road, plus even on Lawrence Lane. And Plus, there's a truck parked in the driveway there. Makes it difficult to see. You add some more cars, you don't know how many cars actually come through our neighborhood for no particular reason, often too fast. And one great tragedy is some years back, just a little bit north of us, just north of 14th Street, the next street north of us, a little girl was crossing the street on her tricycle to see her friend and was struck and killed by another vehicle. We have serious concerns about the safety, and we have younger families moving into the neighborhood. We're not trying to shut her business down. We just want to keep it within some safe limits. Any questions?
Any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Blick?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I'm not for sure this site map that it's showing right now, if it's up to date, if it was 2021. Do you know when that was? Is that the most recent GIS mapping map?
I believe our aerials are from 2022.
2022. So in 2022, that map is probably the most, or that aerial is probably the most up to date. And I'm looking up at it right now, and on that top street, I'm asking you a question. It looks like there's 4 houses with 3 cars in those driveways up there. I also see cars down below on the street, and it's parked on the street. So is it more of a problem with just having extra cars, that what you're saying, or is it more of the amount of cars each house could have? Because I'm seeing quite a bit in that whole area right now.
It depends. There are people who come and visit and sometimes park on the street. People have come for piano lessons, any number of things there. But everyone that comes, that's a narrow street. And as I said, you don't really know how many people come through there for, I have no idea why. And they come blasting through. One time I was walking on the yard, I stepped out in the street and physically blocked a car who was speeding and told him, hey, there's little kids in this neighborhood, show a little more concern. And all I got for it was an FU and a finger.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Commissioner Foster, you had a question?
Is Lawrence Lane the short connector street between the two?
No, Lawrence Lane, actually, I can't see it on this. Let's see, is it over here? It's the same street. Well, it's to the
Right,
left.
it's the other side. All right.
It's over here,
So,
north and south.
so that's the street where is there a current business operating in a house on that street?
It is at the corner of Stonegate.
Please go back to the mic.
Yeah.
So yes,
Can you go back to the mic so the persons who are,
I apologize.
that's right, we'll let, the place operating as a business, can you tell us where that is relative to your home?
It's, let's see, what is it, 4 or 5 houses down west of me. It is the last house on the west end, northwest end of Stonegate Street.
I'll show you.
Okay,
This is his home.
okay,
This is the business in
okay. And that's
Lawrence Lane.
Lawrence Lane, okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for the speaker? Commissioner Williams Bay, I believe, had to leave the meeting, so please mark attendance accordingly. Oh, he's back. Commissioner Williams Bay, did you have a question for the speaker? Okay, it was answered. Okay, thank you. Next speaker, please.
Ms. Fox, this is Joe Johnson. I joined at the start of this item.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Wells, and I live at 7003 East Timberon Lane. We are the backdoor neighbor, which puts us directly to the north, to the property in question.
Okay.
One of the things I'd like to highlight, even though you've been looking at this map, this is a small neighborhood. We only are 33 households. It doesn't go beyond that as a neighborhood, as far as direct connection with anyone else. So let's take a look here a little closer.
And Marilyn, we need you to use, there is a mouse that would allow you to point to the screen, and that allows people participating virtually to hear you, because without the microphone, we literally cannot. So did you find the mouse?
I get it.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Okay. All right, so where I have the arrow right now, that is the far northwest home. You follow it all the way around. That's the outer side of the neighborhood. This is Lawrence Lane, and then there is I call it the creek, it's the waterway. Okay, there's no connection to these properties over here, okay?
Okay.
This is the inside of the I didn't call it, but it's a horseshoe. Okay, here are the inside property. Excuse me. Here are the inside properties right here. Okay, and this is where we are. Okay, at no time have we had any communication from the property owner in regards to this. And I can tell you firsthand, there are many neighbors that never had any communication whatsoever in regards to this neighborhood. Okay. One other thing I'd like to point out, because this speaks to communications and following the rules, there were 2 development application signs posted, but were removed this Sunday evening. My understanding is they should have been there till yesterday. Okay. I have put in a call to the zoning enforcement. I have not heard a call back in regards to that and whether there has been parking violations since she's been operating this home. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Blick? See if you'd remain at the podium for questions, Commissioner
Sorry.
Blick.
You were talking about your area, it's pretty small. Are you guys part of an HOA or neighborhood association?
No, we are not. There has been some review of the original platting and all, that there was a covenant, but I have inquired about that. Even if there is an active covenant, that is a civil matter.
And you answered my second question, thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to see if you had a covenant or if you're more worried about more of the city's policy on parking for houses. Cool.
We're very worried about the safety of our people that live there, especially the children, And we have Coleman Middle School students running down that Stonegate street, and they walk in the street.
Okay. Commissioner Hartman?
Exactly what parking violations are you referring to?
Well, they weren't using the garage, and there was many as 6 cars in the driveway, which also blocked the sidewalk.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
My name is Philip Frankenberg, 6912 East Stonegate. I'm approximately 2 houses from 7000 East Stonegate. The point I want to talk about is, can we have the slide move to the aerial view of the houses and the neighborhood? Thank you. So I've got to make sure I find it correctly. Where my mouse is at right here, traveling from east on Governor through the neighborhood, there is a pass-through, which is a sidewalk. And that sidewalk is used basically on a daily basis by students who are exiting Coleman Middle School. And what happens is, instead of using the sidewalk based on the condition of the sidewalk or whatever they choose to do, they do happen to walk down the middle of our street on Stonegate. And it is obviously a big concern with increased traffic with that many people in that house, that those children are going to be at risk of not being seen at those times because of the excess traffic. And I want to bring that, I know that she mentioned it, but I want to make sure that I bring that forward and say that we have excessive walk-through in our on Stonegate Street itself during the days.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Any other speakers in the room, in chambers, that would like to speak on this topic? Then I'd call for anyone participating virtually who would like to speak on this topic. Okay, with that, we would call then the applicant back to the podium, and you have 2 minutes to respond to the concerns that you've heard.
In regards to the increase in traffic, I believe that has already been addressed and is due to golden boomers, the other businesses that operate in the neighborhood that come through, and has nothing to do with my residents. I have 5 women living in the home. That's probably the number that would be living there anyways. Drop in property values, again, that could happen due to having a very large bus that's parked there with the golden boomers that has large signage on it that says golden boomers right as you enter the neighborhood. And regardless, my house isn't leaving. So I am very sorry if it affects property values, but we're going to be staying there with 8 people, even if this does not pass. I find it offensive that the idea that low income equals poor driving skills, because it quite feels like that's been insinuated at the other meeting as well. The reason for the signs being pulled from the yard, and I communicated this with WPD and with MAP on Con 2023-11 and on 10, people began yelling things to my residents, and that everyone in each home is recovering from trauma, and it began to feel quite dangerous for them to have those signs in their yards. It was already, people would drive by and slow down and point. And I had initially brought this up when I was given the signs to post, that this could be a contentious issue, but was told I had to post them. I could finish, but up to you.
Any additional questions, Commissioner Aldrich?
Yep, ma'am, you made a statement just a second ago that low income and driving skills. I never heard any mention of that whatsoever, so I don't know why you made that statement. It wasn't, nobody in here said that.
Okay, it's the increase in driving, or that a women's house will cause problems with the sewer system, but.
I just had 5 girls extra living in my house, and yeah, sewer system was impacted, but.
Regardless, that's my problem and something I would take care of.
One thing I heard you say this time is that there are 5 women living in the house, but earlier I understood you say there were 10 people living in the house. So right now, how many people are living in the house?
There are 5 women in this house.
In this house, okay. Okay.
I was making a request for, and legally there could only be 8.
Okay.
As it stands with zoning.
Okay. Commissioner Hartman?
So is your request still 15?
No.
What is your request?
My request is that a maximum number of 12 people live in the home.
Including staff members.
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions for the speaker? Okay, thank you. We'll bring this now back to the commission. And we do have 2 separate cases, recalling that the recommendation on this case is for denial. So where are we at? Commissioner Foster?
I understand the concerns about traffic. I live in Delano in a neighborhood with a middle school 1 block to my east and a Catholic school 1 block to my west, and there are children and traffic mixing all the time on my side street. But we are talking about a change between 8 people that are already approved and 12 people, 4 additional human beings. I don't think that's going to be a significant enough change in traffic or utility use to address respond to some of the issues that were brought up. I just don't think that they're realistic concerns. 4 more people are not going to make that much of a difference, I don't think. I am inclined, the 15 limit is just the standard definition that goes with group residence limited, but we can change the conditions of a conditional use the way we think appropriate, and I would be inclined to change this condition to a maximum of 12, which I think is reasonable. Oh, that's not a motion, that's a discussion. I have to always make this clear to people. I'm always thinking someone else might want to speak up as well, you know?
Mr. Warren, you have a question?
I would make a motion that we approve with the change to the conditions that staff put in from a maximum of 15 down to a maximum of 12.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Warren and a second from Commissioner Blick.
A substitute motion.
Substitute motion is being offered by Commissioner Aldrich.
My concerns is that there's 5 people that are residing in there now. And now you're wanting to double that. And even though granted you can do up by 8 right now, but there's only 5 people. And you have, you want to go up to 12 including staff, that's more than doubling the occupancy, and in with all the concerns and issues, the traffic, the parking that they're facing now with just 5, you know, that's going to be a significant increase. So I would like to make a substitute motion that based on staff recommendations and comments, that this be denied.
I'll second that.
I have a substitute motion from Commissioner Aldrich and a second from Commissioner Hartman to approve the staff recommendation for denial and to keep the occupancy at the current 8 for group residents. So further discussion before we call for a vote? Let's do a roll call vote then on the motion to approve denial. The substitute motion.
Is to approve denial, is that a yes is to deny and a no, or the other way
Oh,
around?
please help us on that one.
Approve the staff recommendation.
Approve the staff recommendation. Is that your motion, Commissioner Aldrich?
Yes, I want to uphold what staff is recommending, denial.
So a yes vote means denying the request for expansion of the occupancy.
Yes.
And so we'll begin the roll call vote.
Fox.
This is a tough one for me because I know that there are citizens at every level of the spectrum really fighting substance abuse. At the same time, I find the number of persons in a residential use to be difficult. So my vote is yes to deny.
Dool.
Yes.
McKay.
No.
Green.
No.
Bill Johnson is absent. Blick.
No.
Nix.
No.
Foster.
No.
Warren.
No.
Joe Johnson.
Yes.
Miles.
No.
Hartman.
Yes.
Aldrich.
Yes.
Williams Bay.
Yes.
5.
Motion fails 6-7.
Okay, so we'll return to the original motion, which Commissioner Foster was to, Commissioner Warren, do you care to restate your motion, or can we have it read back?
Would be to approve the request with the change of the maximum number of occupants to be reduced from 15 to 12. And approve the remaining conditions as put on staff on the alternate action.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Warren. The second was from Commissioner Blick. A roll call vote, please. So this time, a yes is to approve the group plus home. Okay?
Fox.
No.
Dool. No. McKay.
Yes.
Green.
Aye.
Bill Johnson is absent. Blick.
Yes.
Nix.
Yes.
Foster.
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
Joe Johnson.
Yes.
Miles.
Yes.
Hartman.
No.
Aldrich.
No.
Williams Bay.
No.
8-5. With that, the applicant's request is approved. The vote's 8-5. Thank those of you who came to testify today. This is a very personal and difficult situation. I would also say that some incredible healing can happen when neighborhoods pull together for the people in their neighborhood, regardless of who those people are. The relationships going forward could make a huge difference for all of you. So thank you again for your testimony, and we appreciate you accepting this decision as we move forward. Next case, pardon me, Commissioner Johnson?
Yeah, didn't we approve less than was requested?
Yes, we did approve less than was requested, yes. 12 rather than the original 15.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's what the DAB also approved in their review of
That's
this. Okay, of this case. Okay, thank you. Next case, conditional use 2023-00011. Christina, would you give us the staff report on this case, please?
Sure thing. The applicant is requesting a conditional use for group residence limited in an SF5 single-family residential district at 6227 East 17th Street North. This is the same applicant as Con 2310, so I won't go over a lot of the details that I spoke about in the last presentation. The site plan here submitted by the applicant shows a 2-car garage and a driveway with 4 parking spaces. They have also submitted.
Let's
Sorry?
give us a minute to clear the room
Sure.
and then, so that as we have people crossing you. Okay, thank you, Christina, if you want to proceed.
Sure, should I start over or should I just keep going?
I
Okay.
think continue from where you were.
So the applicant has submitted another administrative adjustment for this property to allow parking within the driveway as long as it's not 8 feet from the setback. One thing I would like to point out about this property is that it is directly behind the Redwood Trail. So people living within the facility can walk or bike, and it's right in their backyard. If you also look at the Wichita Transit, they provide regular bus service along 2 stops. There's one half mile to the north along West 21st Street and North Farmstead Street, as well as 1/2 mile to the south along West 13th Street and North Woodlawn Boulevard. Although with the Red Bud Trail there, it's a lot easier to make those shortcuts if you need to. The conditional use request is in conformance with the Community Investments Plan. The 2035 Wichita Future Growth Concept Map identifies the site as residential, which reflects the full diversity of residential development and densities found in an urban municipality. The requested conditional use is also in conformance with the Wichita Places for People Plan. I mentioned Strategy 5 in the last report, providing a diversity of housing options to attract new residents and allow existing residents to remain in the established central area. However, if you look at this aerial, it is right next to an arterial. It's easier for traffic to flow to and from the site. So that's why we have a different recommendation for this particular property. And they're also not looking to make any improvements to this property. So it satisfies a Wichita Places for People Plan's current condition. The site is being used as a sober living home and the structure retains the character of the surrounding residential neighborhood. Based on the information available prior to the public hearing, MAPD staff recommends that the application be approved, subject to the following conditions. 1, the conditional use approval is limited to a maximum of 15 persons, including staff. 2, they have to submit a revised site plan that goes hand in hand with the administrative adjustment that I mentioned earlier. 3, no sign shall be allowed except those permitted under the city sign code. 4, the site shall be developed and operated in compliance with all federal, state, and local regulations. And lastly, if the zoning administrator finds that there is a violation of any of these rules in the conditional use, they can declare the conditional use null and void. This went to the DAB on May 1st, District 1, and they approved with the condition that the max is 11, including staff. I have received some phone calls, just generally concerned. One person did speak at the DAB, and she said that her neighbors were also concerned about the group residence limited. And let's go through the site photos here. So this is looking south towards the site. Sorry, it's a little lagged on my part. This is looking north away from the site. This is looking east away from the site. This is looking towards Woodlawn Boulevard. And lastly, this is looking west away from the site. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Questions for staff, Commissioner Warren? I just stuttered just to get a smile.
When we come up with recommendations of 15, is that just the maximum for, that is a blanket for this type of deal?
Yeah, that's what's allowed in the Unified
So
Zoning
it has
Code.
nothing to do with square footage or number of bedrooms or anything like
No.
that? So, okay.
Do you know the square footage of this particular property?
Not off
Is
the
it-
top of my head.
Okay.
I'm sure the
Smaller than
applicant
the
can speak
previous.
to that.
Commissioner Aldrich?
Yes, on the available parking, is this a 2-car garage or a 3-car garage?
It is a 2-car garage.
So now you have less available parking space than what would you would on the other case we just got done hearing. But yet, the recommendation is up to 15, so now you're gonna have more cars that are gonna have a tougher time to find parking.
Yes, but we did take public transportation and walking trails into consideration when we analyzed this site.
But that's
It's
not
closer to
gonna
public
have-
transportation and walking trails.
Which is an option, but if every resident has a vehicle, then you're gonna wind up having a parking issue.
Commissioner Williams Bay?
Yes, did you say that DAB recommended 11 parking spaces? I mean, 11 occupants?
11 occupants, yes, including 1 staff. No, including 1 staff, so 10 residents.
Plus 1.
Plus 1 staff.
Okay. Other questions for staff at this time? Okay, then we would call the applicant forward.
Do you want me to go through it all again? Hello, my name is.
Tell us, do you need to state your name and address
Okay.
for the record?
Hello, my name is Ivory Kaufman. I live at 4848 North Windham Road, Wichita, Kansas, 67219. My business is Ivy Home Foundation. I am the owner and operator. This home is at 6227 East 17th Street North. I love this house. One thing about me, and I forgot to mention with my sober homes, is I only buy homes that I would live in with my family and feel safe in. And if I could have 5 more homes just like this one, it fits every criteria to a T. It's access to transportation. It backs up to the Redbud Trail. It's gorgeous. I love it. My kids love it too. It's very cool inside. So she mentioned several of the features, but my residents love the trail, use it, and it's a very peaceful place to live. It has 8 men living in it now, and I have applicants who would like to move in. You've heard, I think, most of the rest of it. In regards to parking, we have applied we filled in, what is that called? An administrative adjustment, thank you. and have plans in for putting in a single parking stall right here that would still fit in the area that's ours, not the city's, and allow for one more stall right here. Strange thing about men in Wichita in this demographic, many of them don't have cars. Cannot explain why. And use, again, public transportation, share rides amongst each other, or get a ride to and from with friends, or one guy who just moved in has a motorcycle, parks it over here, or they park their bikes in the back in the shed that we have back there. But yeah, this house is just fantastic because the Red Bud Trail also goes over to WSU and then on down to WSU Tech. I love this one. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I didn't cover before. Let's see, when parking came up with the neighborhood, we also discussed how close we are to Woodlawn, and making sure to make all attempts. There's if we go back to the overview, the bird's eye view of can I do that or do you guys do that?
I think Ty Ben can move the slide back to the.
There we go. So there is also this street here that could allow us to keep more parking off of there if it so happens that we end up with a lot of cars in the house. Because we definitely, I do not want people to start parking up here close to the stop sign. I just think that creates a hazard.
Okay.
And people follow the rules of the house or I evict them. So if I tell them not to park there, they won't.
Any questions for the speaker? Commissioner Warren.
I'm not looking for an exact answer because it's going to change, but on average, how many of your residents or clients don't drive because of DUIs or loss of rights?
Right now, 0. Cannot say that that's true in the future, but yeah, some of them pick the house because it's close to where they work. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Hartman had a question.
I was curious, how many square feet in this house?
3,400 square feet, 5 bedroom, 3 bath, 3,400 square feet, 3 living rooms, washer dryer on site. And the men keep the house immaculate. It is crazy. You wouldn't expect it. I don't think you'd expect that walking into a lot of the men's houses, but the lead and the second in this house, they're OCD about it and immaculate.
Commissioner Williams Bay, did you have a question? Answered. Commissioner Foster?
This would permit up to 15 persons. Is that how many you prefer, or again,
No.
Are you going to go for the 2 per bedroom, 10 max?
One other thing about me, and I've been doing residential and commercial real estate. It's a family thing since I was 5, and I will not put someone in a room that does not have an egress window. This house, another reason why I love it, is when it had foundation repair made, they put egress window in almost every room downstairs. So it has another great room downstairs with 2 large egress windows, so it could work as a 6-bedroom. I haven't put up a wall there. I really don't want to. I find that kind of trashy. And that's not even the 3rd living room. If I included that room and called it a living room, it would be 4 living rooms in the house. So it truly can house 12 people, with them each having their own, with 2 people to a bedroom.
You would be comfortable with a maximum of 12 as opposed to 15?
Yes, I will not put 15 in a house.
All right, thank you.
That's just, yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Hartman?
One other question, or a couple. How long has this been a group home?
January.
Since
January 1st, I believe. I'd have to check my records, but January.
And has this property had any violations?
No. The police have never been called.
And I failed to ask this of the last case, but I want to ask it, are there any sexual predators ever accepted into your group living arrangements?
Yes.
Okay.
I
And you
consider-
follow the regulations for notification of neighbors in those instances?
So every SO, every sex offender registers.
Okay.
With
their address.
And I have a system where I have their parole officer's phone number, and we communicate on a regular basis. And we do weekly UAs, random UAs. There's a whole system of accountability.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Then Commissioner Dole?
Yes, I may have missed in your original presentation, but what, if any, formal training did you have to run this kind of business?
Formal, are you saying in regards to being a landlord or in?
Well, it's kind of a special landlord. I mean, maybe there's no training required for this. I'm just asking.
Yeah, so in the state of Kansas, anyone can open a sober house, and there's no licensing, there's no whatsoever. My training, I guess you would say, would be as I have owned real estate, residential and commercial real estate. I opened my first business at 16, and then to become, and also been a property manager, and then to learn to do this, there's no class you can take. The people who operate them they open and they learn as they go. And so before I opened it, I traveled to multiple places and found the ones who I like what they're doing. I think they are doing it well, and put myself as a student underneath them. Does that answer your question?
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Aldrich?
So what you're saying is that there's no state statutes that regulate or control or have any input whatsoever on the type of work that you're doing?
No, it's a little scary.
That's a lot scary.
Yeah, because sorry, I won't start. Yeah.
Okay.
There's no regulation whatsoever on sober homes.
Okay, any other questions at this point? Next, is there anyone in chambers who would like to speak on this item? Seeing none, is there anyone participating virtually who would like to speak on this item? Okay, we'll bring this back then to, hearing none, we'll bring this back to the commission. Commissioner Foster.
This time I will make it a motion. I would like to move that we approve per staff conditions with the exception that of condition 1, we change the maximum number of persons from 15 to 12.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I just have a question for staff real quick. Do you know if this location is in a HOA or a neighborhood association? And do they have a covenants or anything?
Not to my recollection, but that is a civil matter, so, yeah.
I was just wondering if not, if there was any parking requirements or not.
When we do the review of the ownership list, we also look for any neighborhood associations that are established that we can notify the neighborhood association. And I don't believe this one had an established neighborhood association.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to a roll call vote. A roll call vote.
Commissioner Fox?
No.
Commissioner Dool?
No.
Commissioner McKay?
Yes.
Green?
Yes.
Bill Johnson absent. Blick?
Yes.
Nix?
Yes.
Foster?
Yes.
Warren?
Yes.
Joe Johnson?
Yes.
Miles?
Yes.
Hartman?
Yes.
Aldrich?
No.
Williams Bay?
No.
Motion passes 9 to 5.
9 to 4.
9 to 4. Motion passes 9 to 4. Thank you. all participating. That brings us to case 4.7. If we could have the staff report, please. Aaron, I believe.
Good afternoon, Erin Ebach with the Planning Department. This is a request to change the zoning on a property from SF5 Single Family Residential District to LI Limited Industrial District. The application area in this case is 0.35 acres, and that is the north portion of a greater 1.2 acre property. You can see here on the map that the south portion of the property is already zoned LI Light Industrial. That change actually happened in 1959. At that time, the district was called the E Industrial District, but by today's code standards, it is equivalent to the LI Limited Industrial District. The property is currently used as vehicle storage and warehousing, and a complaint was called into zoning enforcement stating that the SF5 portion of the property had started being used for the industrial operations of the site that was permitted to only to the south. So the applicant ultimately is seeking to rezone the remainder of the property to bring the entire thing into compliance and to be able to use the whole site for their business. As you see here on the zoning map, the entire property is surrounded by SF5 single-family residential district zoning. To the north and west is the Rivendell addition, which is currently being, in the process of being developed with single-family residences. To the south, there are properties developed with single-family residences and manufactured homes. And then east of the site is also a property developed with a single-family home. There are some commercial properties in this area that you can see on the map. Those are located closer to the intersection of 55th Street and Hydraulic. And then actually, if you go even further down to the south and the north a little bit, there are, again, some industrial properties on the arterial. Due to the residential zoning surrounding the property, this site will need to comply with both compatibility, setback, and height standards, as well as coming into compliance with screening, lighting, and landscape standards per the Unified Zoning Code. There is a screening, or there's a fence currently on the property, and I can show you all that looks like in the site photos. The applicant has indicated, or did indicate at the DAB meeting, that has since been upgraded, so I will let them speak to what the current condition is of the fence. The proposed zone change is in partial conformance with both the Community Investments Plan and the South Wichita-Hayesville Area Plan. Both of the land use concept maps for these plans designate this area as appropriate for residential land uses. So it is in non-conformance with those maps in both plans. However, it is found to be in partial conformance with the locational guidelines of the Community Investments Plan, and the South Wichita-Hayesville Area Plan does indicate a desire for new commercial development in the area, and cites that this area where there is currently this existing commercial and industrial development be appropriate for those future land uses. So it is in close proximity to an area in which the Hayesville Area Plan recommends that use. DAB heard this case on May the 3rd, and they voted to approve 7-0. And I will go through the site photos and then address any questions you may have. So you can see here, this is again that gate that I mentioned. It's my understanding this has since been updated. See, this is the residence east of the subject site. South of the subject site. Again, south of the subject site. Here again, you can see some of the previously installed screening. And then again, screening there. With that, I'm glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for staff? Commissioner Aldrich?
do you know whether the screening around the entire property, including what the property that we're talking about right now, the section, is that all screened in right now presently?
You know, I don't know. I couldn't get back there to take the site photos. They are required, though, to bring the entire site into conformance with the landscape ordinance and the zoning code. So upon approval of this request, they would be required to install both the screening fence and as well as a landscape buffer in those areas.
Well, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for staff at this time?
I think I only want to ask a question regarding the conformance of the screening, because this place has sat here for, I mean, it apparently was rezoned in what, 1959? And it's sat there for probably the last 10 years and been non-compliant with screening. And I can assure you that because I drive by there, this is very close to my house several times a week, no change has been made in the screening. So what is going to assure that if this is approved to expand, what they're storing on this property, which is a bunch of dead equipment, they've stored it there for years, that they're actually going to be in compliance with putting up proper screening?
I would defer to JR to respond to that question.
I would say that we would respond on a complaint basis. Obviously, this is a case in front of the commission, so we are aware of it, and we would probably do our best to make sure that it gets done. However, we do not have the ability to monitor every conditional use or zone change, obviously. So we would rely on a complaint, and I would think there could be some from the surrounding, particularly to the west, northwest, if that doesn't happen.
Okay, yeah, because somebody's just taken some property, put some inadequate screening around it, stored dead equipment there right in between two residences, and they've done it for a year. Weeds have grown up and everything. It's looks terrible.
Okay, any other questions at this point? Then we would ask for the applicant, please, to come forward, state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes to tell us about your project.
Hello, everybody. My name is Luis David Alvarado, and I'm the owner of JNS Underground. I recently bought the property about a year ago, and I know that on the previous hearing, we had the same, everybody brought it out that there was a lot of dead equipment parked out there. We're a small business and we're just trying to use all this space, but we do move all of our equipment stored at that property.
So there's abandoned vehicles or non-working vehicles there at this moment?
There was, the previous owner had a bunch of, he used to work on the oil fields, but he had all his equipment there, but he moved everything out. Everything that is in there, it's been in use. It's not like dead equipment or anything like that.
Okay, and what's your plan for the screening to?
I upgraded the fence on the south side of the property. And we're planning on upgrading the gate. We haven't upgraded the gate, but we will eventually. We're just getting some quotes right now.
Commissioner Aldrich?
Yes, sir. So do you or do you not have screening around the entire property, including this part of the property now?
I have screening on the south side of the property. I own the property to the east side as well. So we're planning, I haven't, the east side of the property, we haven't upgraded the screening because we own the property to the east, and we're planning to do a screening on both properties at the same time.
Okay, and do you have a time limit when you're looking at doing that?
I don't have a time right now.
So it could be a year, it could be 10 years down the road?
No, it's gonna be within the next year.
Additional, Philip?
I just want to make a clarification that even going to industrial zoning does not allow the storage of wrecking and salvage. So inoperable vehicles would still require a conditional use. They're allowed to store operable vehicles, but wrecking and salvage for inoperable vehicles would not be allowed even with this zone change.
Okay. And you're aware that inoperable vehicles cannot be stored there?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Commissioner Blick, you have a question?
So I just want to verify. So this photo that's being presented to us, that has completely changed. All of those are gone?
There's one more that I'm still pushing him to get it out. I've been trying to get him out for the past, since we bought it for over a year, and he's saying that he's gonna move it eventually. But all of the equipment that is parked there that belongs to me, it's operable. I mean, there's not junk or anything parked on the property.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions for the applicant? Is Commissioner Aldrich?
Yeah, you just said something that they're all repairable. Are every single one of the vehicles operational?
No, they're operable. Yeah, they're movable vehicles.
Operable.
Okay.
Operable.
Okay. And you said that you have replaced the south fence, but we just heard a commissioner say she hasn't seen anything change.
This side of the fence has been upgraded over here.
About the property in question, which is outlined in red.
It's
That's
one
the
whole
part.
property. It's one. It's the same property.
Okay, so you've
There's
put
no
a new fence down.
There's no
below.
access. The only access to this property is through here.
Okay. So you're gonna screen that whole section, not just the red area?
Correct. Because there's no division in between this property and this one. It's one whole property. It's open.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Is there anyone in chambers who would like to speak on this item? Yes, sir. This is public comment, so thank you, sir. Please remain, and then you'll listen to public comment and can respond to any other concerns that are raised. Okay, first speaker, please.
Lonnie Barnes, 2924 North Terrace Drive, Wichita, Kansas. Mine is more for clarity. Can you go back to that screening that was shown here with the black mesh?
Type it, there we go.
Okay. So for a point of clarity, even for myself, when the ordinance says you have to put up a screening between residential and this portion here, I have the same question in here because this group here voted to allow a screening between a parking lot and my residence is only about 10 foot away. And that was, screening is to stop, I guess, people from looking directly into my property and light shining directly into me. Is this acceptable for screening?
JR, can you answer that for us today?
I will. Yes, it is not.
It is not. So I guess I'm asking, what is acceptable for screening? Is that a privacy fence, wood, what?
Where solid screening is required, wood could be acceptable. Masonry, concrete, brick, block, any number of things, but that would, what's there would not be sufficient.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comment?
No, I just want a point of clarity because I've yet to see the screening that came up 3 months ago, the requirement to put it between my property and there. And so I don't want this to pop up and say that's my screening.
Okay, thank you, Lonnie. All right. Any other persons who would like to speak on this particular case?
Darren Rader, 1301 East 57th Street South, Wichita, Kansas, 67216. This property has come a long way. If you go back to the aerial view, all the abandoned equipment that was mentioned from Ms. Miles is now located directly to the west of this property on the residential land that's right next to Laura, which has all been moved to this lot. And if you look at the street view, you can see that they put up a brand new wood fence along the street side, what's hiding all of that abandoned equipment. So I think it's funny that the city zoning inspector says there's never been a complaint. I stood before this commission when we was having another agenda meeting a month ago complaining about this property along with another one that you guys just allowed to be limited in industrial. So this, where this brand new fence is, where that white van, that's where all the abandoned property is now located, next door to this property. That's why they put that brand new fence up. This property that's on question today has been cleaned up and a lot of changes have been done.
which does complement the neighborhood, but I don't know that the dilapidated fences and stuff, doesn't that need to go from top to bottom to meet the appropriate fencing classifications? So, you know, with this having 2 feet on the bottom, 2 feet on the top, that still is not appropriate. So the corrections that were made weren't acceptable according to the rules with this. So, you know, I mean, they're making leaps and bounds progresses over there from the previous owner. That's not what's in question, but what's in question is, you know, we've got serious issues down on the south end of this area that this gentleman's business, he works directly for the individual that we had questions with on the other property. I have grave concern that there's going to be contaminants dumped on this property like we have documentation of as well. I mean, we're all on we're on well water and septic services. We don't have access to city water. This access on 55th has city water. So they're not affected by what they do to the groundwater. Along with the other property that was in question. They both have access to city water to where all the residents down this area does not. So I ask that this commission denies the request, and I'll personally be making more recommendations to the city zoning department and central inspections, because I personally complained about it before this meeting and several other times.
Okay, thank you for your testimony. Any questions for the speaker? Okay, there anyone else in chambers who would like to speak on this topic? Is there anyone participating virtually who would like to speak on this matter? I'll bring it back to the applicant. If you would come back and respond to the concerns that you've just heard expressed. You have 2 minutes.
I will bring his question up about the screening facing his property. I was not aware that wasn't compliant with the city requirements. I will definitely upgrade that fence, and I do not know of the gap on his question, on the gap from the 2 feet gap that I have from the fence above the ground. I don't know if that's required to come all the way from the ground up, because there is a 2 feet ditch that you cannot see what's inside the property.
So what I hear you saying is you did not understand the requirements for the screening and landscaping that are required if this is approved. So could we have clarification of that to make sure there's understanding about what would be expected? No?
As far as screening is concerned, it would need to be solid from the ground up to the minimum height.
And the minimum height is 8 feet? 6 feet. Okay, so
It could be 8 feet, but 6 would be the minimum.
6 feet minimum from the ground up. And then there's also landscaping requirements outside of that.
For the landscaping, it only applies to the portion being rezoned, and that would be a landscape buffer, which the landscape ordinance also says that they can use existing trees. It looks from aerial photographs that there is a fairly good amount of trees on the rear portion of the property. Again, this only applies to the portion being rezoned, because the existing LI property that the majority of this site is already zoned was in existence prior to the landscaping ordinance. So just along the west, north, and east boundaries within that red box would have to come into compliance with landscape ordinance, and that's 1 shade tree per 40 linear feet. They do have the ability to rely on existing vegetation, which it, just even from an aerial point of view, almost to me looks like it would be compliance. We'd want to see some type of documentation of where those trees are, so that we have official proof that yes, there is that landscaping there.
Commissioner Blick?
Just for clarification, JR, the applicant was saying that there's a 2 foot from the street down into the ditch, but it goes all the way down to the ground. Wherever the fence is, it has to be down to the ground.
Yes.
Correct.
Even
Thank
if
you,
it
JR.
causes drainage issues?
I didn't.
JR, even if it causes drainage issues,
I don't know that I'm prepared to answer that. I'm not sure I've seen a fence cause a drainage issue, but under the zoning code, solid screening should be solid screening. It should be from the ground to the top of the fence, whatever height that might be. You know, there could be some situations where the fence could be, a fence like this might work, but there might be a berm in front of it. The idea is solid screening. I think at some point here, you could probably look in there and see in.
Okay, thank you.
This one does not, this fence is not down in the ditch. It's up on the level ground. The ditch starts after that. So having it all the way to the ground, it's never been all the way to the ground. But I can't see that it caused draining problems because it's not down in the ditch. It's on level ground above the ditch.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Foster?
I actually have a question for the applicant. Do you own the property to the west?
I own the property to the east, which is this property.
Okay, so you do not own the property to the west where someone has said that all the dead equipment that was on this lot has been moved to the
No,
lot
ma'am.
to the west? Okay. Thank you.
Okay. We've been through all the testimony. Any other questions for the applicant? Bring this back to the commission. What's your?
I have a question for staff.
Commissioner Aldrich. Thank you. You can be seated now. Question for staff. Aaron, are you still here?
Yeah, I guess my question is, just out of curiosity, is there a time frame? If this is approved, is there a time frame that the applicant has to have the screening completed?
There is not. So this is not like a conditional use where, there are conditions specifically stating that the site plan needs to be turned in within a certain period of time. Again, I think I would probably defer to JR's previous answer and that it would be on a complaint basis. So if we realize that this was approved and then they had not installed the appropriate screening and landscaping, then we would go from that point.
Okay, so it could be a year or 2 years before we get screened.
JR?
If I may, I think the applicant in the room with us is hearing this conversation. He's aware that that's a violation to not have the screening. So no, it won't go a year or two.
Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Foster?
Can I ask for a clarification on what happens if we don't approve this? The remaining land to the south is already zoned industrial, so it is going to continue being used the way it's used, basically, correct?
That is correct, yes.
All right, thank you.
Okay. What's your will, Commission?
I would move to approve per staff comments.
We have a motion to approve, Commissioner Foster, a second from Commissioner Dool. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay?
Nay.
Was that a nay, or was that, okay.
Nay.
We have then, there are 12 commissioners present because Commissioner Williams Bay left, so the motion passes 11-1. Thank you. That concludes our public hearing items. So we have a department review, item 2023 quadruple 06. This is the first part of our addressing of the short-term rental program. Scott Wadle will be presenting, and if you'll just note, what we've prior looked at in one fell swoop is being broken into two parts. The first part is the zoning aspect of changes related to short-term rentals, and then separately we'll address licensure issues and municipal code related to short-term rentals. We have authority to make a recommendation. The second part, we can give advice or encouragement to the city council, but they will make the final decisions on municipal code and zoning. So that's why we're looking at it in two pieces. So here we go, Scott. with item 4.8, the first portion.
Sure. Well, thank you very
And
much.
I'd like
Thanks.
to make a motion that MAPC approve the recommendation of advanced plan.
For those of us who aren't on advanced plans, we have no idea what that might be.
And actually, the motion this morning of advanced plans, Commissioner Duell, was to bring this to the full MAPC for review and discussion and public hearing.
Oh, I thought we had.
Okay, I have a motion and a second, but, no second, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, for,
Seconded. I did second, Ann.
Commissioner Miles seconded and Commissioner Johnson moved that they accept the recommendation of advanced plans.
So discussion. So what would be, was there quite a bit of changes that was on the advanced plans that was from what we got presented at the previous?
Okay, if we accept this motion that was made from advanced plans, what we approved was to bring it to this commission. And so you can vote on it, but we're still gonna hear it.
Yes, we felt the full commission, I think the Advanced Plan Committee, I listened and I understood they believe the full commission should hear some of the public testimony regarding the issues. Does that make sense? Is that accurate?
So South.
Oh, we have to vote on the motion.
We have to vote,
Okay.
or if there's a substitute, the only substitute is the denial, right?
Okay.
Not to hear it.
Wait a minute. I'd like to withdraw my motion.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right, I'll withdraw my second then.
okay, we've withdrawn the motion and the second, and so we will hear this item. Scott, will you proceed with a overview of the short-term rental zoning changes?
Again, you have 10 minutes.
Can
I thought 3.
Scott, have we handed out the stuff you gave us this morning?
No, sir. What we've got is we do have we've got two things. Number one is we have a staff report for the zoning and the MAPC policy. It's one staff report for those two items. And then we have a separate staff report, which is for the licensing and the nuisance party houses, which is the second one. And then there is a third one, which there was a handout that was presented for advanced plans. I don't know that it was created for this one. So I'm going to look to Philip and ask if he can just run some quick copies on this one. And what it does is it's a summary of the changes that have occurred since the MAPC meeting a couple weeks ago. So we'll get that distributed out for y'all.
The reason why the motion was made this morning was because we did have some changes, regardless of how menial they might be. But, and then these folks haven't, people that weren't there haven't got any of their paperwork to be able to even study it, and then you're asking to make an appointment, make a motion to approve or disapprove.
Well, and I can't speak to the motion, but in terms of the materials that were distributed, it's true they were distributed after the packets were mailed out initially. Those are the two agenda items that you should have received, at least electronically. I saw that there are some paper versions, so I assume that those got distributed as well. So, and I'm more than happy to take you through.
Yeah.
No, I think it was maybe Monday.
I think it was Monday that we sent them
We got
out.
the electronic copies. I did have a question on those electronic copies. There were items that were highlighted in yellow.
Yes.
Not question and answers, but on the.
In the zoning portion and
Yes.
also in the licensing. And those are, in the licensing, those are highlighted changes that occurred since the MAPC meeting last week. So for the zoning ones, JR, those highlights were a working copy, so it's a way that we're track changes over time. So not necessarily changes that occurred since the last MAPC meeting, but changes that have occurred over time with the document.
The summary page will be very helpful.
Yeah, and I'm more than happy to walk you through that. And, if at the end of this, if you choose to continue and receive the presentation, at the end of it, If you don't feel comfortable, you don't feel like you've gotten the information that you need to make a decision, you can always defer it. You've always got that option as well.
Okay, so I'm a little stuck. Are we going to wait for the handout so you can quickly see the overview of changes since we saw this most recently?
If it is possible, what I'd like to do is take you through the PowerPoints that I have for this particular item, and then I would like to read through the handout with you. I think that the PowerPoint will give you a good background on it, just a refresher on where we've been. The handout then will give you we'll go point by point on what some of the changes have been.
Okay, thank you. Proceed.
Okay, so Ty Ben, if you can pull up that PowerPoint, this is the one for the zoning changes. And while she's doing that, I guess I would just point out that there we go. I'll cover that later then. All right, so very good. So again, this one is on the zoning portion. We'll talk more as we go through this PowerPoint about what that entails. Okay, very good. So the staff recommendation to the MAPC is that you would take 4 actions on this one. First one is to initiate the amendment to the Unified Zoning Code, which is required in order for an amendment to take place. Number 2, that you would approve the proposed code changes, which are detailed in the packet that you received. That you would recommend that the governing bodies adopt those changes as well. And then the 4th one deals not with the zoning code, but with a policy that the MAPC adopted. And that is the policy regarding signage that goes out as part of a development application, the public notice signage. And I'll explain that, it's in the PowerPoint, but those are the actions that are recommended for the MAPC to take. So this is the overview where we've been. We talked about a lot of these at the last meeting. At the feedback that I received from the MAPC, part of that feedback, what I heard was that there was a lot of information in the PowerPoint, there was a lot of information in the staff report. So I've tried to really curtail that substantially. So today, I'm not going to go through all of these in depth, but I'm more than happy to answer questions about those if you do have questions. Also, I would refer you to the packet in that the staff report is 1, 2, 3 pages long. There are attachments about the process. There's attachments about existing conditions and regulations. There's the proposed changes, but then by and large, the biggest chunk of the packet, both packets, is public comments that have been received to date. So in terms of what the issue is, I think the issue or the challenge that we face as a community is that short-term rentals are operating. They're here in Wichita. There's approximately, by different estimates, 500 to 600 of these operating in Wichita today. Many of them are operating in areas where it is against the zoning code. We have a zoning code that did not anticipate short-term rentals. And so they've come about, they exist. The zoning code in most residential districts does not allow for stays less than 7 days. And short-term rentals, just by their very nature, are looking for short duration stays most of the time. So to rent one of these or to use one of these for less than 7 days is against the zoning code in those residential districts. The other thing that we face too as a community is that we are receiving complaints on occasion about short-term rentals. So this is, I think, the 2-part challenge and really trying to determine what's a good fit for Wichita when it comes to this new development. Let's see if I can get the slide to advance. Ty Ben, can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, very good. All right, process to date. Next slide, please. I don't know why it's not working up front. So we've had a series of meetings. This is just a quick summary listing of those. Starting back in 2021, all the way through the end of last year, beginning of this year with district advisory board meetings. Next slide, please. And more recently to the advanced plans in March, MAPC in April, where the MAPC, really what I heard was it's a lot of information. Let's send it back to advanced plans to give them time to really dig into it. And then we had the advanced plans meeting this morning where they reviewed it, heard public comments, and now it's back to the MAPC where you have the opportunity to take action on it. Certainly not required. Next slide, please. In terms of definitions and mission, next slide. So short-term rental, just so everyone's on the same page, we're typically talking about a place that is rented out on Airbnb, VRBO, one of those platforms. So they're typically fully furnished and offered through these online platforms. Next slide, please. I think that this has been an especially robust community conversation because it touches on, for the city of Wichita, it touches on a number of things that come up in our mission statement, which is keeping residents safe, growing the economy, dependable infrastructure and services, and providing conditions for living well. And I think it touches on all of those in a variety of different ways. And I think that there are a variety of different perspectives on how it does touch those. So I think that's why this has been especially robust. Next slide, please. So in terms of the proposed regulations, again, passing over what our existing ones are, which are in the packet. So there are four elements that we're recommending changes to. The Unified Zoning Code, to creating a licensing program, to changes to the municipal code regarding nuisance party houses, and then also a change to the MAPC policy number 20, which is regarding the development application signs. So those four elements are recommended for changes. Next slide. Out of those, right now for this item, we're just talking about the two. We're concentrating on the zoning code and the policy. Next slide. So in terms of the zoning code changes, they would apply only to the city of Wichita, not to Sedgwick County. Sedgwick County would still have the limitation on 7-day stays. Also, whether or not they're allowed in the process to approve them will depend on where they're located in what zoning district, and we'll talk more about that. Next slide. So in our 21 zoning districts, there are 5 that are identified in the proposed zoning change where short-term rentals would need to receive an administrative permit or zoning permission in order to operate. Next slide. So you can see that those are SF10 through MF29, and they're listed here on this table. Now, in all of these situations, if a property is owner-occupied and operated as a short-term rental, so say the owner, it's a single-family house and it has an accessory dwelling unit in the backyard, and the owner is on the property, occupies that property while they're using it as a short-term rental, they would not need any changes to the zoning, no administrative permit or anything. It would be allowed by right. And we're doing that based on public comment and feedback that we heard that there seemed to be a consensus that people felt like that was not going to be an issue, that the owner was going to keep things operating well. If it's outside of one of these 5 zoning districts and it is not owner occupied, it would still be allowed by right. So if it's in a commercial zoning district or another one of these, not these 5 zoning districts, it's allowed by right. But if it's in one of these 5 zoning districts and it is not owner occupied, then they would need to come and request an administrative permit in order to be in compliance with zoning. And you may have heard about administrative permits. They already exist, but they're only currently used for wireless communication towers. So we are expanding that to include short-term rentals as part of the change. Next slide. So in terms of definitions, there would be a new definition created for short-term rentals. It would include bed and breakfast because they're fairly similar uses. It would not include a group residence or what we've talked about today as part of those zoning cases. Yes, I saw some eyebrows rise, but no, it would not include those. nor would it include a hotel or motel. So you could not open a Days Inn if you received the administrative permit for a short-term rental. Next slide. Now, it would not allow for a short-term rental to be operated out of a recreational vehicle, so you can't have an RV parked out there. Even though Airstreams are very cool, you would not be able to do that. You would have to be licensed with the city, and that's a whole nother one that we'll be talking about with the next item. You would need to be in compliance with the various codes that are in effect for properties. Next slide. Now, how we would do this is we would do it through an administrative permit. One of the reasons why we're proposing an administrative permit and for this particular use is because, again, the quantity between 500 and 600, we want to provide an opportunity to sift through which ones are controversial and which ones are not controversial. We'll talk a little bit about how that happens. But the ones that are not controversial, we're proposing that we would approve those administratively, so they would not come before the MAPC, and they would not go before the DAB or the City Council. They would be approved in the Planning Department. That's for the non-controversial ones. For the ones that are controversial, they would convert to a conditional use, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So there would be more of a standardized zoning process for those. So in terms of if someone wants to operate a short-term rental at their property, they would need to make an application for an administrative permit through the Planning Department. As part of that application, there would be a notice that would go from the Planning Department and be mailed out to the property owners of all the abutting and contiguous land around that particular parcel. And as part of that, that would be the only public notification that would take place. There would not be a sign is what we're proposing. And the reason why we're proposing the change to your policy, that you would change your policy, is because we've heard from short-term rental owners and operators concerns about that, they have a fully furnished residence, that it's not always occupied, and that it would be vulnerable to theft or break-ins. And so they've requested that the sign not be required. Now, if the case is controversial, then they would go through the conditional use process. If they go through the conditional use process, the sign would still be required for that process. The change to policy number 20 is only for the administrative permit for short-term rentals, not to conditional uses or other zoning district changes. So, next slide.
I just have a quick question.
Yes, sir.
So I know that when notifications go out, there's property owners that are renters that live in those houses. So when you send them out, it could go to California and then never gets back to the person that's actually living beside. Have you guys ever thought about sending one to the actual address also?
We have. That has come up as part of advanced plans discussions. It's not been on a recent agenda. I think it's been a couple months since that discussion has come up. But that's been a discussion not in particular for short-term rentals, but rather for all zoning notifications. So that conversation is not carried forward, but I do want to let you know that conversation has been happening. Yep.
Commissioner Aldrich has a question too at this point.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Scott, I'm curious on that number of 50% of the owners. Why is it 50%? Why is it not 40% or 30%?
Sure. Well, at this point, that was a discussion that happened in staff meetings. We felt like 50% showed that there's, of course, a majority of the property owners who either are concerned about it or not in agreement with it. So simply because of the fact that it gets to a simple majority. That's why we established it at that percentage. We're certainly open to thoughts and ideas about changes if needed.
Well, because what my concerns are on the percentage is that when you look at the notification boundary, if you will, with the adjoining properties, that really limits that notification area considerably. So if you have somebody that's 200 foot away or whatever, they're not going to get notified because they're not in that very tight notification boundary. But yet you're still looking at 50%. So I think that's going to happen if you're going to keep that tight of a notification area, I think that percentage should come down.
Okay.
That's just my thoughts.
Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think that that's a good segue into what's on the slide, which is that there would be a 14-day protest period, very similar to what we do for other zoning cases. Again, if it's more than 50% of the owners of adjacent and contiguous properties that protest, then it would become a conditional use. Next slide. And we've got some maps that will show this. So this is a map, just some scenarios to illustrate how this works. There was a memo that was included as part of the packet for the MAPC meeting a couple weeks ago that provided additional detail and is available online. So in this instance, the orange house applies for a short-term rental administrative permit. The blue properties, the properties outlined in blue, are abutting and contiguous to it. So you can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 properties that are adjacent, abutting and contiguous. So you would have to have more than 3 owners. You'd have to have 4 owners that would file a protest in order to exceed the 50% threshold. Now, when we talk about owners, there's additional details in the next slide. So, next slide. So we're counting ownership the same way that we do for other planning protests. So it's very common to have 2 people listed on the title of a property. So in this instance, in order to be counted as towards the owner percentage, it would have to have signatures from all of the owners. So if there are 2 people listed on the deed, you would have to have both people sign. That would count as 1 owner, not 2, 1 owner. So that way, if you have a property that is owned by a group of people, it doesn't, it does not weigh the numbers in their favor. It's 1 owner per based on the ownership. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Scott, got a quick question.
Yeah.
So if you have 2 owners on the property, one of them fails to sign, then that protest would be null and void, correct?
It is not a valid protest at that point.
Thank you.
Yep. And that is consistent with how protests are handled for other zoning cases.
And in notification, right now you notify the HOAs or the neighbor associations. Are you going to continue doing that?
No,
on this?
We will for other cases, but not for this one. This one is just to the property owners that are abutting and contiguous.
Okay.
At least that's how it's proposed. There are some different scenarios that can happen with this. And so as staff, we kind of got together and thought about some different ones that might apply. So this one, in this instance, there's an orange property where we're saying, okay, what if hypothetically they applied for an administrative permit for a short-term rental? All of the properties outlined in blue are abutting and contiguous to the one in orange. In this instance, though, there are 3 properties: the parking lot to the kind of northwest, the building to the southwest, and the building immediately to the south. Those are all owned by the same church. So in this instance, the church counts as 1 property owner despite having 3 properties and despite having the majority of the property in this area. So they count as 1 owner towards that ownership total towards the 50%. And we go through this scenario because in this way, by counting owners and a percentage of owners, it is different than how protests are done per the state statutes at a percentage of land area.
Commissioner
Staying with that scenario, if I own 3 houses, that's 3 votes or 1 vote?
Counts as 1 vote. Yep. Okay, next slide. For the how we're going to operationalize this,
Scott, I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
So in this particular case, if he owns 3 houses, it counts as 1 vote. Are there 3 properties? Or just 1 property?
It counts as 1 because we're doing it based on the owners, total number of owners.
All right.
Yeah.
3 abutting properties owned by the same person. That's
1
something
owner.
that brought it up.
Yep.
That also includes the property that's in question, right?
It does not. So just like the current protest, we do not include the applicant property. Yep, the subject site. And I'm seeing that Jeff and JR are having a conversation, so, okay. At any time, jump in if I, okay. Oh, thanks, keeping Jeff in line, all right. In terms of how this gets operationalized, because again, there are 500 to 600 of these in Wichita currently, we are proposing that the short-term rental property owners would have 12 months to come into compliance with this portion of the zoning code. We are also proposing that we would hire temporary and part-time consultant assistants to help process the administrative permits, because zoning runs with the land, and these would be one-time approvals for a property because they don't run with the ownership. We anticipate that this would be a one-time surge in cases, and if we can get through that, then we can return back to a rate that is more sustainable for staff to handle. The other thing, a quick note that came up during advanced plans this morning was that if they have 12 months to come into compliance, that would allow a short-term rental that can prove that they were in operations prior to the time that the zoning code change takes effect. They could continue operating for the 12 months. However, if you wanted to start a new short-term rental that had not previously been operating, you would need to receive the administrative permit in order to start up that new short-term rental. Next slide, please. So so if, let's say hypothetically, there's a scenario where we run into a situation where more of these are controversial and end up that there's a great number of them that go to a conditional use. Well, we have a number of things that we can do to help address a situation like that, because we're very cognizant of the idea that we have 24 meetings with you, the MAPC, every year. So, and we know that your agendas are very robust right now. So what do we do if we end up with a lot of conditional uses? Well, one option is that we can set a limit, we can meter the amount of short-term rental conditional use cases that would get onto the agenda at every meeting. We know that that would push out how long it would take to get the cases heard, but it is an option that we can do. Another option would be to consider holding a request of you to hold special MAPC meetings to consider conditional uses for short-term rentals. And then the third would be to issue a moratorium if we simply get to the point where we're not able to process them. I don't put that up there because I don't think that it's a likely scenario, but I do want to let you know that we do have that option. So, and that would be at the city level that would need to occur. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that is the portion about the zoning code. The policy is fairly simple. This would simply exempt the administrative permits for short-term rentals in the city from having to comply with the sign posting requirement. And with that, I'll stand for any questions on this. Oh, wait, no. Sorry, I do want to take you through this document, the 1 to 2 pager that was handed out. In terms of the changes, and I'm just going to speak to the zoning code and the MAPC policy. So the zoning code was updated to include all of the definitions and terms. That was the one change that was made. And to the policy number 20, there were no changes made to that. The rest of the changes were to the licensing proposal, and we'll talk about that more as the next item.
Okay, any questions on the presentation to this point? Commissioner McKay.
No questions. Scott, comment on how homeowners associations handle this.
Sure. So homeowners association provide another level of regulation, or they can, and that is really a private contract between private parties. So they can choose to prohibit short-term rentals if they want to. These proposed changes to the zoning code would not impact HOA covenants, so it doesn't undo anything that's been done to date, and it does not prohibit or restrict HOAs from having those types of provisions in their covenants in the future.
Commissioner Aldrich?
Scott, is there any thoughts about, right now we have, 500 to 600 Airbnbs in operation right now. Is there any thought of a cap, that how many is gonna be allowed, whether it's gonna be 1,000, 2,000, 5?
There are some communities that do it that way. In the feedback that we've received, we've not heard that that's a direction that people wish to pursue as of yet. It doesn't mean that it couldn't be done, but we've not heard feedback that led us to move in that direction.
Shouldn't that be something that's thought about now, since we're in the early stages of looking at doing something? Because if you have, say, an area that you got a 5 or 6 block area, and all of a sudden every single one of them wants to do an Airbnb, they would be allowed to do that.
I think there's two things that I would point out to that. Number one is that as the MAPC, we look to you to help indicate to us about what's a good fit for our community and what isn't. So we're looking to you for the guidance. So I'm excited to see what your guidance is. The second part is that we initially did hear comments that there were concerns about clustering of short-term rentals and the effects that having a lot of them in one small area would have. We've done this a couple of different ways. And I guess before I get there, the first version that we had would have allowed them by right throughout the city without the need for zoning process. We took that out for public comment. We received comments that people were concerned because they wanted to be able to have feedback on whether or not a short-term rental next door to them was an appropriate use. And so because of that, we drafted up the zoning process, largely very similar to what you see today. But with that, we included a 600-foot buffer distance between short-term rentals. That provision was taken out to the district advisory boards, and the feedback that we heard some comments in support, but majority of the comments that we heard were not in favor of that. Also, at the city council level, we heard questions about whether or not that was a good fit for Wichita. And so that is how we have arrived at the proposal, was through that iterative process of here's an idea, and getting feedback on it.
Okay. That ends questioning on this part. I believe we need to hear the second part in order to make a decision on the first part. Yes or not?
Not entirely.
Necessarily.
What I would suggest is that the first part, so the first staff report and the first item is on zoning and the policy.
Let me see.
You have the authority to, in order for changes to be made, you have to approve it. Otherwise, it doesn't go anywhere. What I would highlight to you, and I think what you've stressed during their comments are, these are very connected. Now, the next one that you'll hear about, it is just advisory. You're only providing a recommendation. But if you approve the zoning and you don't, well, I guess since you're advisory on the other one, it's a little less complex because the city council can elect to hear it whether or not they want to. But the first one could have impacts on how the city moves forward. So if you don't approve the zoning one, it really changes kind of the menu of options.
Okay, Commissioner Foster?
Ty-Bin, can I ask you to put up the slide with the 4 recommended actions? And Scott, are we at the point where making a motion to take those 4 actions is appropriate, or is there more you want to say before we do that?
Well, obviously public comment. And questions and discussion, but the staff recommendation at this point is for that you make these 4 actions today, if you're comfortable doing that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I think we would then call for public comment because you're basically the applicant, right? I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
okay.
That's one, yeah.
Okay. So do we have members of the public in chambers who would like to make comments on the zoning and MAPC policy changes? Yes, please step forward to the podium, and you have 3 minutes. And thanks for your participation. And this will be on zoning and the notification.
Jack Patton, address 337 South Rutan, Wichita, Kansas 67218. As to the changing of the zone, I'm sure there's legal issues on that, but that seems to be kind of uncomfortable because it's hard to change the zoning back if there's screw-ups. And that's part of the big problem here. You got people in the neighborhood that really shouldn't be there. How do you get rid of them? And since the zoning stays with the property and not the applicant, that just increases problems for the neighbors and the neighborhood. I'm sure everybody's familiar with the big incident that started all this, so I won't go into that. The other issue I have is with the sign or the lack of signs. I spoke earlier about it was being hidden. I guess I need to change my verbiage on that. I'll go with restricting, concealing, or failing to notify, or keeping secret. If you're restricting or concealing the notification of the neighborhood and the residents in the area as to what's going on, the question becomes why and who are you concealing it for? Who's wanting this concealed? And why is it a special exemption for Airbnbs? I can go on websites, the internet, find houses for sale that are empty, fully furnished, for rent, and any Airbnb that's already on the website. So the excuse of fear of people breaking in is offset by the desire of those who are going to profit from this, the Airbnb and the realtors, is kind of offset by wanting to keep any persons who are concerned about this, keeping all the information under the radar, so to speak. Based on past experiences in inspection, military, and personal life, if you think you have to be secretive about your business, maybe you shouldn't be doing that business.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Other speakers in the room who would like to speak on this topic?
Thank you. My name is Jason Krause. I'm at 243 North Pinecrest here in Wichita, Kansas. Couple of things that I would like to propose that you consider as you consider this. One, I would very much like to see us keep the 7-day limit in place during the intervening period from whenever the legislation is passed until licensure and approval is required. I would like to see that rather than have us with a year of Wild West, unlicensed, renting, coming and going, possible more party houses popping up. I'd also like to have any past violations of our current laws on the books or general party house and nuisance items to count against those that are trying to apply for these processes. We have, in my neighborhood, I have one property owner that I believe to be negligent. She's had the police called 3 times on properties that are short-term rental properties, and she's not in compliance with the law as she generally operates right now. The signage has been spoken about. I think at a minimum, for any new properties that are not currently operating that might be grandfathered in, or that might not be grandfathered in, pardon me, they're not listed on Airbnb yet because that would be against the law in this. I think they should be subject to signage. Anything grandfathered as it goes through that, maybe that might be accepted, but new properties going forward, signage should be a requirement. We need to notify the neighborhoods. And also a couple of other things. In the current regulations as it's at, it's a 3 strikes and you're out situation on licensure. 3 strikes is probably too many. I think 2 major events that are causes of misdemeanor faults ought to be enough for you to be stripped of your licensure to operate that property safely in a neighborhood. That's 2 very egregious violations in a year. I think asking for more than that is inviting negligence. I also would like to see us move that approval threshold down to 30% to avoid situations where we have kind of odd numbers. You know, that hits us where a 40% approval, you know, or a 40%, doesn't, or basically it allows for people that are good neighbors to get approval of their neighbors, and those that have issues where people next door to bring them to you to discuss what those issues are as we work towards approval. And I'd love to see a 21-day admin permit approval protest window, but I understand that that might be already locked into the books. We may not be able to move that. But again, any questions you have for me, I'd like to answer.
Okay, questions for the speaker?
Can you identify, or can you define egregious?
Egregious events that we've had in my neighborhood have been eggs thrown over back fences from one Airbnb property into another. I've also had airsoft and BB guns being discharged towards my house from an Airbnb house behind me. We've had, of course, the shooting, the event that started this whole process on April 11th, 2021, where Elijah was killed out my back window, basically. Those are 3 major ones that we've had police called. We've had other events where people are driving aggressively through the neighborhood, screeching tires at many, many hours of the day and night, driving wrong way up one-way streets, in part because they're not familiar with the neighborhood, but then doing it at some speed. That's not something that invites a lot of neighborly tension.
So you're basically just saying that when police are called out, is that what you? Because
I would like to see police being called as something that is a very, very negative impactor to someone's ability to operate one of these properties in an otherwise residential neighborhood. These are commercial interests. If we had police called at a commercial interest 3 and 4 times a year, we might be a little concerned about the operation of that business.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for the speaker, Commissioner Blick?
When you were talking about signage, are you just talking about the signage temporarily or a permanent signage so then there's notification or safety that people will know that when they're showing up at night, because most of these people are not from this area that are coming in, as signage out in front of the house that lets them know that, hey, this is a house, that if they're trying to knock on some door or trying to get into a house, that, or are you talking just temporary?
I believe more the temporary development application signage should be absolutely required for people applying that are not operating currently. I believe that. I don't want to dictate signage for an operating and approved Airbnb, just because that is really on the onus of the operator, the owner, to get the proper instructions to their guests so that they can safely get to the property. Now, that being said, somebody who's trying to break into the wrong house because that owner didn't operate and didn't communicate that information properly, that's something else to consider as an egregious violation that I would consider a safety violation to our neighborhoods. Again, commercial traffic in a residential neighborhood.
Okay, any other questions for the speaker? Thank you for your participation. Any other speakers on this topic? Please come forward.
Hi, my name is Emily Alvarez. I live at 2456 West St. Louis Street here in Wichita, Kansas, 67213. I wanted to speak on this topic. I wasn't prepared for this necessarily, but I'll do my best. First of all, I want to say I'm sorry that other people are having negative impacts of negligent Airbnb owners. I am not one of those, so I'd just like to speak on that. I take pride in the homes that I run. Safety is my number 1 priority of my guests. I have Ring cameras out front. We have lights on whenever it's dark. The minute I have it automated, so the minute the sun goes down, my lights come on. That safety is number 1 for me. I communicate with my neighbors. They know that we're Airbnbs. They have my phone number to make sure they can reach out to me if there's any issues. I've been a super host, and we've been in operation long enough to secure that title with Airbnb. And with that is approved by our guests. They have a rating system. If my house was not taken care of, if it wasn't a good representation of the neighborhood, I would hear about it, and then people wouldn't rent my property. So that's something that I definitely take into consideration. The other thing about our Airbnbs that I'm a newer resident of Wichita. I'm married to a born and bred Wichitan, but I've come around to being a Wichitan myself. It's important for me to not only make the city better, but to make our neighborhood better, and that's something that, again, we take immense pride on. But it's also the fact that when my family came in from out of town for our wedding here in Wichita, downtown Wichita, this is where my family stayed. A lot of our guests are friends and family. They're coming for weddings and funerals. We allow, with our properties, it's an affordable option for people to come with their kids, with their families. They have small gatherings, but we do not allow parties. We say that in our thing. So I know some people are negligent, but that's not the case for us. In addition to that, sometimes we do rent out for multiple months at a time, and we've had longer term guests, 3 to 6 months, for people that are working in construction. And even right now we have a nurse that is here with her family, her 2 kids, her 2 dogs, her husband all moved to town. So for me, I know I don't have much time, but that's something in terms of signage. I would not want signage in my yard because it's a safety issue for the people that are moving in. We have family with young kids there, so that would be my concern about the signage. I understand that people want to know where Airbnbs are. To me, that's a personal communication thing, and that's something that we do. So I just wanted to represent that as well.
You have 11 seconds for any additional
No, go for it.
comment you have.
Yeah.
The signage we're talking about is to notify the people living around the property in question that an application for zoning change has been filed.
Okay.
So that wouldn't be a permanent sign to say, this is an Airbnb, but rather there's a zoning application for this property that's temporary prior to a hearing like this, so that folks know something's changing and can look into what that change is.
And then once that permit is
Once the permit, what the zoning change would occur,
Perfect.
or the administrative permit was issued, then there would be no signage identifying. So would you be opposed to the signage to let people know a zoning change was happening at your property? Do you see any concern about that?
I would be interested to see how that works for our property right now. I mean, we have someone in there through July. She's a travel nurse. She's here in town.
Yeah.
Would I be required to put a sign out?
That there was going to be a zoning change on that property? Yes,
yeah,
but
that would just be my concern.
but there'd be a grandfathering for the first year. So your timing of the administrative permit could be made such that it wasn't occupied at the time, potentially.
Perfect. Any other questions?
Okay, any other questions for the speaker? Okay, Commissioner Aldrich.
Ma'am, even though that you're going to be grandfathered if this passes for a year, if you were a new applicant, for example, would you have any restrictions or any concerns or about notifying your other neighbors about what you're looking at doing, or would you just rather not notify them?
For me, I don't plan on keeping secrets. That's not the kind of business I want to run. And to me, this is a business. This is something that, this is how I'm making my living here in Wichita, is by, providing hospitality. And that's the way I say it. You're going to come to my city. I'm going to give you a list of recommendations and all my favorite restaurants. So to me, it's not a secret. I'm not trying to hide anything. I think I don't have any major concerns. Like if we decide to open another Airbnb and this passes, I'm assuming I would go through that same process as someone new for the next property, right? So I don't have any concerns about notifying people, but it's also I think we talked about that a little bit earlier. A lot of the neighbors in the neighborhoods I pick, because when I go to buy a house, I don't want to be an HOA. There's other restrictions, and we understand that people that are purchasing houses in HOAs have different expectations. So that's not a property I would purchase first and foremost, but the properties that would be grandfathered in, most of our neighbors are rentals, like long-term renters, and often decades-long renters. And the condition of those homes, to be perfectly frank, are making my Airbnb look bad. Those are the houses that aren't being taken care of. Those are when you say you're going to be mailing that letter out of state, yeah, that property has not been seen by the owner in probably a long time because they are in bad condition. those are the houses that are not being taken care of. Those are the people that are not, in my view, representing the neighborhood well. And of course, that's just my case. I don't represent all 500 Airbnbs in town, but for us, yeah, you can notify them, but it's not gonna be the people living there.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay. Any others? Commissioner Warren?
I'm gonna make a comment here because it keeps coming up and I just keep biting my tongue. I'm opposed to putting up the signage on this because not only are you inviting the neighbors, you're inviting the world. I mean, people from all over are gonna see that. Do we really want to hear a testimony from people that live in other neighborhoods? You know, a block, 10 blocks, half a mile away to come in and talk about that. So if we're notifying the people that are directly around the property and we establish that zone, those are the ones that I want to hear from. And beyond that, I don't think it's anybody else's business what I'm doing with that.
Okay, thank you. Right, other speakers on this topic in chambers. Please go to the podium. You know what to do. On another case, is there a prohibition from speaking on two cases? Okay, 3 minutes, Lonnie.
Okay, so
Your name and address.
Lonnie Barnes at 2924 North Terrace Drive, Wichita, Kansas. So I've been listening to this here, and I'm kind of torn both ways on this in here. I think there should be something that associates Airbnbs with the surroundings in which the people are coming for. It's a reason that people come and stay at the hotels and the locations, and most times it's in relationship to the event or wherever they're trying to attend. And so I think there should be some kind of correlation that shows in where we put the Airbnbs and where they are. I understand the part about homeowners association being able to put more teeth into it, but I think something should be given to the neighborhood associations as well. You know, what I see in here, a lot of neighborhood associations that have changed from homeowners that used to be 90% homeowners are now 90% rental property in here. You've changed the dynamics in just the price value of the homes in here. So that needs some consideration. So I think notification needs to be given to the neighborhood associations to let them know what's coming at them and how much of it's coming at them and where these things are at in here. So I get a little torn about that, but I do realize that there need to be other options for property that's around events, things of this nature, that they should be able to be able to do something with their properties.
Thank you. Any questions for the speaker? Okay. Anyone else in chambers who would like to speak on this item? Go ahead, please, sir.
Hi, my name's Brian Alvarez. I live at 2456 West St. Louis Street. That's Meridian and Central areas, just so you get an idea. Me and my dad own Airbnbs. We've owned them, short-term rentals, since 2017. I'm born and raised in Wichita. We have one in Orlando, Florida, Claremont to be exact, and West Palm Beach, and also recently in Denver, Colorado. Emily's my wife, so she said a lot of what I was going to say. But basically what I was saying is we go off of reviews. Everything's reviews. So you stay at an Airbnb, and if your place sucks, the people will tell you it sucks. If it's a bad neighborhood, it'll tell you it's a bad neighborhood. It brings your score down. Airbnb will get to the point where it suspends you or even terminates you if you're below like a 3.5. So 5 stars A, 4 is okay, but 4 for us is bad, and since you want 5. We have 6 in town. We have 4.91, 4.88, 4.92, and 4.93. Living in that area, Delano and Sunflower District, we've actually brought up the area. We've cleaned it up, trees, like she said. The long-term tenants next door and around that area don't take care of their places. I feel like we've brought value to the places, and made it better, to be honest. More lights in the neighborhoods, and it's a little safer too. We have the privilege of talking to our neighbors because we like to be open about it. I know not everyone is, and I'm all for putting a license. In West Palm Beach, they have a license that they do online, and then if you have complaints, you can look up databases who has Airbnbs or short-term rentals. You can look that up online, and if you want to complain on the property, you can. So that's something done online. So I think that'd be something to think about. Zoning, I think we're really strict on the zoning here. Just to give you a heads up, it's going really detailed. Other places just say, hey, this is, in Orlando, it's Lake County. We have one set of rules. They have like a tax that they've agreed with the Airbnb. We're going to charge an extra 3.4%. And West Palm Beach, they have it's $225 a year. I think the same as here that you're proposing. And also they have an inspector comes out at least one time. They can come up to 2 times a year. So I think that's something that we should think about. I know I saw it on the notes, but I think that's great. I just think the zoning, and like Emily said about the people saying, if my neighbor's going to decide that doesn't take care of the property that has their grass 3 foot high and is going to decide on my Airbnb when I cut the grass and spend a lot of money on it, I don't really agree with that, or the owners that don't care about these places. That's something to think about as well. And like I said, I'm from Wichita. I love Wichita. I promote Wichita. And I really hope that you guys come with something that's like on par, not too detailed, but not. And I really do think that we should have licenses 100%. So stuff that the Crown Heights does not happen again, but it's going to happen regardless whether you're at a hotel or Airbnb or any other place that you're renting from. So, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Commissioner Blick?
I have a question. So at these other locations that you have, do they have signage or sticker on the door so law enforcement knows, or anybody like that or anything?
No, so in Orlando, Claremont specifically, Lake County, what they do is you get the license and you have to place it inside the door, kind of like a hotel, or like hotel rooms have it, but it has my name on it, the owner's name, and then it has their name and when you last did your license, and then it'll have a number to report anything. You can put it to that county number or whatever, but you have to replace it obviously every year. So there's nothing outside, but it's inside the door. It has to be inside the door. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Okay. Anybody participating virtually who would like to speak on this item? Okay, we'll bring it back to the commission. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, I do.
Okay.
Trish Heilman. Sorry, I had my hand raised. I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. We see you now. Could you please give your name and address, please? And then you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, my name is Trish Heilman. I'm at 139 South Fountain, 67218. I was here for the advanced planning meeting, and so have had a little bit of time to like think through the process and the stuff, and also actually talk to some other community members in the meantime. And as I've been doing that, I have just sort of consolidated some ideas, thinking that having the process really be not so much zoning, but having it be really focused on licensing is really, really important. And so for why? Because licensing, if you have a problem property, if you have a problem owner, then the neighbors can have input yearly into whether that is stopped or allowed to continue. If zoning gets changed, that is in perpetuity. And so, that again can change the nature of a neighborhood. If the majority of the properties are zoned for business versus just residential, I think you could see long-term issues. Also, we don't know, this is all new stuff, this whole Airbnb. And so we don't know what 10 years down the road is going to look like. And so having zoning change and again be permanent, I think decreases flexibility for our city. And if we have a yearly licensing process, we can be more flexible with how things are going to have to zig and zag and change. That would require, from what the conversations that I had at the advanced planning meeting, after that meeting, a board that would be established to take the licensing protest submissions or whatever. So if in the licensing process, if the neighbors protest, then there would need to be a board established that would hear those protests. But that would need to be a board, not the MAPC, which I think you guys are pretty busy, if I'm understanding things correctly. And so having that not on your plate seems like real wisdom. Plus, it could be a separate group that has more representation from all, from Airbnb owners, from neighborhoods, from this kind of stuff. Having that kind of process, I think, could be really, really important, and and pretty darn doable. I think most of the things that are in the zoning changes can be just switched right into the licensing procedures, because most of the stuff that staff has thought of are really thoughtful and really important. And the party zoning thing, the party stuff. sorry for not the right words, but that stuff is really important to get implemented. And having a process is really important so that people can operate their businesses legally is really important. So thank you so much for your time.
Any questions for the speaker? Thank you. Any other persons participating virtually who would like to speak on this topic? All right, that concludes our public comment on this segment. This being the segment MAPC has authority to make a decision on. Commissioner Blick.
I got a question for staff. Being this would be an administrative permit or adjustment, would it be a layer that's on GIS mapping that would actually identify that property as?
The answer should be yes. It's going to be a zoning case, an administrative permit. So, I mean, if you open up GIS, you should be able to see it if the case tracking is on. Whether it's a separate layer identifying just STRs, I'm not certain that that's going to be the case. But it will be just like any other zoning case.
But you could
through
definitely
GIS.
find it that way. If you wanted to know that, hey, was this an Airbnb in your neighborhood, then that'd be a way to find it too.
You would go to the zoning map, find that property that you're interested in, and then have a case. You'd have to follow that case link to see what the case is, because it could be any number of other cases, but yes.
Okay, definitely. Thank you.
And again, if a zoning change were made, the person wanting to run the Airbnb would have to, or whatever short-term rental, would have to apply for a license within the 12-month period. Licensure being a separate issue, but once the property is zoned, anyone who purchased that property subsequently could operate it with no further action. They would still have to apply for a license, but that doesn't require notification or public oversight or input. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner McKay.
Scott, you're saying that without zoning, this issue can't go forward, is that correct?
No, not necessarily. Without the zoning, so if you say, hey, this is the wrong approach, we need to do something different, or you say we don't even want to change the zoning, the challenge that we would run into is that the zoning code currently prohibits short-term rentals unless you're going to make it be a stay of 7 days or more. So we've still got a challenge with the zoning and how a lot of these are being operated in the community. So that would be the issue that would be confronting us.
So based on what you're saying then, 7 days is the key. If you say, I'm gonna say 3.5 days or something to that effect. And then amend the zoning code based upon that, and you could do it by right?
We looked at that approach early on in the process, and the feedback that we got is that neighbors wanted to be able to have input on whether or not a short-term rental was an appropriate use nearby them. So that's why we have structured the zoning process the way that we have. And so that's how we've arrived here.
And the licensure is not location specific. So if we relied on licensure to govern this matter, then the licensure could be used at any property, again, without notification. Can you help me understand that part?
Sure. Yeah, we haven't covered the licensing yet, but that's in the next item. But the licensing is it's per the unit, per the dwelling unit. So if a dwelling unit is being used as a short-term rental, it is a license for that particular unit. So a duplex, for instance, could have there could be two licenses for that duplex, one for each dwelling unit.
But the problem, the licensure process currently would have no oversight process or opportunity for public input.
That is
until the license is granted and then complaints.
That is correct in that there's no mechanism for notification or receiving of public comments as part of the licensing process as currently drafted.
Scott, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Joe, why are there 300 to 500 of these still being operated? Have we not done anything as a city?
There
This
have,
is it.
yes, no, there have been enforcement actions taken where we have received complaints. So again, our enforcement is done on a complaint basis. And we, last year, I believe we were somewhere in the range of 25, somewhere between 20 to 30 complaints. Of those, what we do is we serve them notice. They have an opportunity to take corrective action. Many of them did. They advertised just for 7 days. Some of them did not. And at that point, we can't force them to come into compliance. What we do is we take them to court. Now, since this process has been going on, we have halted those court proceedings or proceeding with taking them to court to see how this gets resolved in terms of the regulation process.
Thank you.
Commissioner Aldrich.
What would prevent an operator, an owner of the Airbnb advertising for 7 or 8 or 9 days? And then, but actually they're only renting it out for 3 or 4 days?
You know, I think that would come down to the platform logistics in terms of if you're advertising it for 7 days, I don't believe that the system will allow you then to, it depends on how you do it, but I think you set it up so that it only allows you to book it for 7-day stays. Now, that is not to say that there aren't Airbnb operators who are operating today without that 7-day restriction. There are, you can look up online, there are a number of them.
I know, but what I'm saying, let's say they advertise it for 7 days, they book it for 7 days or 8 days or 9 days, and their tenants, after 3 or 4 days, we're done, we bail out.
Certainly,
And
that could certainly happen.
so if that's the case, why do we need to even go through this whole process?
Well, I think that we're receiving feedback that from owners and operators, especially of short-term rentals, to say that the current regulations don't fit with either the way that they're operating or also with market demand.
I'd like to make.
Most of them are operating illegally right now, and I think some action needs to be taken to correct that.
The regulations we have are obsolete, and they don't fit current conditions, current market, or current reality. And they need to be updated, and I think this is a very good process for updating them. Is there more discussion, or can I make a motion? Are we ready yet?
Make a motion.
All right,
Joe's ready.
I would like to move that MAPC takes the recommended 4 steps from staff to initiate and approve a zoning code amendment, to recommend that the governing body adopt the amendments, and that we amend the MAPC policy 20.
I would second that. If I could add discussion to that, I would prefer to see some additional notification to the HOAs and the neighborhood associations. Right now, they already send notification out for every one of these cases to the neighborhood associations and HOAs. They're the ones who are actually dealing with this problem. And then they usually go and give them to code enforcement when they get so many of these phone calls, because most people don't know the process of going through code enforcement. They don't get a vote, but they at least get some type of notification that these are in their area.
So was that a substitute motion, or?
No, I just asked to see if you would add that to your motion of adding HOA and neighborhood to be notified.
I don't know that I'm personally inclined to, because that truly complicates the process a great deal, adds a whole lot more people to the mix of people who are not going to be part of the protest percentage, but are liable to show up at a meeting and have something to say about it, even though it's 10 blocks away from them.
Well, and
I wouldn't change my second, because I don't want to give more authority to homeowners associations than what they've got already.
Well, I mean, they're right now, as is, they notify they're notified one person, whoever is on record as, like, I'm president of a neighborhood association. I get every notification that's in this whole southwest part of Wichita. It's just one person that gets that notification. as a neighborhood association. They send it out to them right now for every single case that's in that area. I think that they're the ones who are usually dealing with these situations. They should at least be notified. They don't get a vote, but they can still be notified, just like how it is now. They still get notified, but without no votes.
I'm not willing to change my motion, so I think if you want to include that in what we're voting on, you will need to make a substitute motion and get a second, and we have to discuss it separately.
Oh, sounds good.
You had a comment, Commissioner McKay. Is it lend to this topic specifically? Go ahead.
Well, I can sit here and I've had meetings with Scott. To me, there's enough in the air that we don't know what's going on. I agree that we're behind times with what needs to be going on. I think a timeline for getting it done is fine. Licensure is one of the key, if probably not the key thing. That's why I keep asking about zoning. That we need to maybe have a committee within this group, work with staff and say, what can we do to make it go forward and not, because homeowners associations are altogether different than neighborhood associations. Homeowners associations can make their own rules. Neighborhood associations can't. It's just a sounding board. So, that's one of the clarifications that needs to be straightened out. We've listened to people today testify about they work, they want help from us. I don't know that we shouldn't, take a little bit of time. I know everybody said, well, we've been working on this for 2 years. We've not been working on it for 2 years. Staff's been working around it and about it for 2 years. But I don't, I'm having a tough time with something being, pardon my expression, shoved down my throat that I don't think we all know what else. How many questions have been asked here today that we don't know, and we're going to pass legislation, especially the zoning that's going to go on with the property for infinity?
Commissioner Warren.
The problem we got with that was that no matter what we come up with, we won't know what we've got until you enact it. We've got something that I think that we can modify as we learn as we go. But I think this search for perfect is going to get in the way of the good. And I think we've got something that's good that can work and get us going down the road, and then we can make adjustments to it as we need. Because we won't find those things out until we actually do it. We don't know what we don't know yet, and we won't know until we figure something out and start it.
My concern is that a zoning change feels really permanent to the location, and then if the operator changes at that location, then there's no opportunity to police that particular operator. So to me, licensure makes the most sense.
Yeah, I think we can licensing.
Before a zoning change. Licensure, the Nuisance Party Act, the Nuisance House Act, which actually governs residences too, where this kind of thing can happen, to me makes a lot of sense, but we don't have jurisdiction over those two rules. So, Commissioner Duell.
To move this forward, I would like to second Commissioner Foster's
Motion. Okay.
And if somebody wants to make.
Call the question.
Yeah.
Wait.
I'd like to clarify who seconded. Was it Chuck?
Commissioner Foster made the motion to accept to approve the recommendations for zoning and MAPC policy change on notification. And we have a second from Commissioner Warren. And a double second from Mr. Duell. So
I'd like to make a substitute motion.
Commissioner Joe Johnson would like to make a substitute motion.
Can we defer this for some period of time that's reasonable to come up with the answers of the questions that were raised today?
I missed the very first part of that, Joe.
For some reasonable time. I don't know how long to defer it.
Which questions do you want answered, Joe? That's an open-ended deal that we can do this all year long.
I think staff has them written down.
I just don't think we need to be passing something that we don't fully understand. So I'm gonna second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Johnson to defer a decision. We don't have a specified date for the deferral or any actions to be taken between now and the deferral.
Well,
Could we?
let me back up a little bit. Following up on Commissioner McKay's statement about maybe a possible board or a commission from this group of maybe 4 individuals or so, would that be something that this board would consider before making this final vote and moving it forward?
I think that's what advanced plans for.
Okay.
I mean,
So the advanced plans would then be the body to do further study with staff until a strong recommendation for approval could be brought to the full commission.
that would be my motion.
And just a quick staff clarification. I appreciate the dialogue. I appreciate the challenge, of deliberating this. The one thing on this motion is I'm just curious, what additional information or what specifics can staff do? And I'd like to kind of know that answer, because if I get the question about, well, what happened at MAPC, I'd like to be able to say, what specifically staff can do to help move the discussion forward to a solution, whatever solution is preferred.
Well, one of the questions that was brought up, was the notification area. The other question that was brought up was the protest percentage, whether it could go from 50% to 40%, 30%. And then, so those comments were made, and then it just dropped, so, again, those are some of the questions that I want answered. Does it make sense to lower the, again, since we're so tight on the notification area, does it make sense to drop that percentage of notification down from 50% to 30%, for example?
And do we also need to notify the occupant as well as the owner?
We don't for zoning cases.
Scott?
Well, we've had those questions and we've answered them.
Okay, what's the percentage then? What's the percentage?
I haven't had a chance to talk yet, so let me just weigh in a little bit. I mean, we've been going around and around on this topic since 10 o'clock this morning. I mean, I'm frankly worn out. Staff has made a proposal. We got to establish a baseline at some point in time. I mean, we can study the thing to death. At that point in time, we'll just 50%, 30%, whatever it is, we're going to establish a baseline and we're going to react to that. Who says we can't change it after that? I mean, I want to tell you where I live. I live in a neighborhood that's 50 years old. We've lived there since we built the house. We don't have an HOA. We don't have a neighborhood association. I can tell you this, I'd rather have an A, B, and B as neighbors to the north or south of me, either one of them. I take them today, and we can move out the people that own the houses, okay? I mean, you could load up the van and ship them out. I mean, I don't want anybody to know that, but nonetheless, it'd be better occupants in my view than what I have right now. So that would be my view. I think we ought to move forward, establish a baseline. Surely we can change the rules, regulations, whatever we establish today, later on, if we need to. But we got to start somewhere.
I'll take one more comment, and then I want to call the question on the substitute motion.
I call the question for the substitute
Okay,
motion.
all right, thank you. We're thinking the same way there, Commissioner Warren. So we are calling the question on the substitute motion, which is to defer to a future date with a sub-study group, which would be advanced plans. So we're laughing. Are we clear on what we're voting on? Okay, and so let's do a roll call vote. Do we defer the action? Yes or no?
Fox.
I'm going to say defer, no.
Duel.
No.
McKay.
Yes.
Green.
No.
Bill Johnson is absent. Blick.
Yes.
Nix.
No.
Foster.
No.
Warren.
No.
Joe Johnson.
Yes.
Miles.
No.
Hartman.
No.
Aldrich.
Yes.
Williams-Bay is absent. I have the vote as being 5 for, 7 against.
5 for deferral, 7 against, so
Double check my math. Let's see. I've got McKay, Blick, Foster. Foster voted no. That's where my math got off.
Okay.
Okay, so it's 4 to 8. Thank you, everyone.
So the substitute motion failed. The original motion was to Commissioner Foster with the second by a couple folks to make the recommendation for approval per staff recommendation and comments.
What the advanced plans?
No. Advanced plans recommended that the full commission hear the case. You understand now why, okay, yes, right. That's why the advanced plans didn't recommend, because they wanted MAPC to fully participate. And so now the motion to make the recommendation for approval, and we'll do that by roll call also. And so Fox gets to say first, and I vote no. I don't want to make the recommendation for approval as it stands, no.
Duel,
Yes.
McKay,
No.
Green.
Yes.
Bill Johnson is absent. Blick,
No.
Nix,
Yes.
Foster,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
Joe Johnson,
No.
Miles,
Yes.
Hartman,
Yes.
Aldrich,
No.
Williams-Bay is absent.
Motion passes 7-5.
That's what I have.
Okay. We have Part B, which is recommendations relative to the municipal code and licensure. We do not have the power to approve these recommendations, but we can make a recommendation to the city council related to these. So again, we have a presentation where Scott can quickly review what has changed since we last heard these things, which I think is the part that we're most interested as a commission, since we can't approve it anyway.
Yes, and I would add that this is the one where the most significant changes have occurred.
And that was largely because of the Realtor Association information presented about their concerns, I believe.
Yes, there were some questions. We had some dialogue with them about their questions, and we'll talk about the outcomes of how that changed the proposed licensing. What I would like to do is ask Ty Ben to go to the licensing PowerPoint, and please, Ty Ben, if you can, progress forward to the where we start talking about what's in the licensing. That way we don't have to cover all that prior material. I'm going to grab a quick handout. Okay. So for the staff presentation on licensing. So again, there are 4 components that you're considering today with related to regulations of short-term rentals. This is licensing and also the nuisance party house ordinance are the 2 components that are under consideration with this item. So for the license, an annual license would be required. The proposed fee would be $225. That fee would cover the cost of administration, so taking in the application, processing it. Also, it would cover the cost of hiring a part-time staff person for zoning enforcement to do that processing. It would also cover and also enforcement. It would also cover the cost of hiring or contracting with a company to provide monitoring services of short-term rentals in the community and to monitor whether or not they're in compliance with the regulations. As part of the license, short-term rentals would be required to maintain $250,000 of insurance. That all the marketing materials would need to include the license number to verify that they are in compliance with the provisions there. They would also have to post a good neighbor policy. And this is based on what communities like Albuquerque have done for their regulations. Next slide, please. The maximum occupancy would be 2 adults per bedroom plus 2 adults per unit. So that would allow you, if you've got a 3-bedroom house, you could have 2 per bedroom, so 6 plus 2, so you could have 8 people, adults. It does not regulate how many children can be there. And also it limits gatherings to a maximum of 20 persons or less until 10 p.m., at which point then the gathering needs to cease and only the people who are staying there should be on the property. It also requires that there be a registered contact with the city that would be available to be contacted 24/7. So we've talked a little bit already today about ownership and what if someone in another state owns the short-term rental. Well, this would require, the licensing would require that there be a contact that can respond 24/7 and that the responsible party, which is that contact, would be expected and required to be able to appear at the premise within 30 minutes. So, and that is a change from what you saw last time, is that we've established that expectation that they're supposed to be able to be to the property within a time frame of 30 minutes. Next slide, please. Licensing continued. So the city would have the right to inspect short-term rentals upon complaint. So this is not an inspection that would take place prior to the license being granted, but rather it's on a complaint basis. That there would be compliance with the codes is a requirement. Again, the distance separation is not included. That was an early proposal that was taken out before you saw it last a couple weeks ago. Also, what's been removed is a proof of written notice to properties within 200 feet. That was included. Last time, there were some comments about and questions about whether or not that was redundant. Also, in the licensing, there's no formal mechanism for public input on whether or not a license should be granted. So it was a courtesy notification, and because of the redundancy and the courtesy nature of it, in the questions that came up, we have removed that from the current proposal. Next slide, please. The license contains the enforcement. It talks about the misdemeanor suspension. As was brought up during the public comments on the zoning piece, there is a 3 strikes and you're out provision for revocation of licenses, and it's 3 within a 12-month time period. Revocation of license, yes, 3 within any 12, and you would be ineligible to obtain a license for the next 5 years. Next slide.
Can I say?
Yes, sir.
Is that complaints?
No, that would have to be violations.
Okay, that's clarification.
Yep.
I've got a question as well. What is the fine? Is the fine going to be $500 for people that you find out are operating without a license?
Oh, it is, and the penalty, and it's too bad Sharon's not here. I'm gonna try and look that up.
I believe the answer is yes, it'd be a misdemeanor, so should be $500 and or 6 months in jail. I'll verify that, but I believe that would be correct.
Okay, yeah, JR, if you can look through there. Any other questions on this information so far? Yes, Mr. Warren?
Notification at 24/7 and then showing up within 30 minutes. Where did that 30 minutes come from? I'm thinking if I own one of these and I got a call at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm I'm not sure I could get my pants on in 30 minutes.
Yes, sir.
Would an hour be?
We can certainly change that to be an hour. What it was is, it was.
Just pretend like you're going to Walmart.
Oh, we are divulging.
It was in response to some of the comments that we heard from the prior version at the MAPC meeting a couple of weeks ago, that the issue was that, okay, it's great that you have a registered contact for these, but what are the expectations of what they're going to do to address the situation? And so making it so that they are the clear expectation that they should appear at the property is how we attempted to address that. The 30 minutes, I believe, was included because it was felt that that was, if there's a situation or an incident that's taking place, maybe there's loud music or people are throwing trash or something, it was an attempt to get them in there in a timely fashion to be able to address those situations.
And then what's the penalty if they're not there within 30 minutes?
Then,
Hey, Scott, I'm here.
What is the enforcement?
fantastic. Sharon to the rescue. Thank you.
Yeah, the penalty for any violation, whether it's the 30 minutes or whether it's having too many people, it is a misdemeanor and it is a fine up to $500, and arguably jail time up to 6 months. Those are offenses that would go through municipal court, so it's not a civil penalty that Scott would just be rendering. It would have to go through court.
And then I have a question. The platforms that govern Airbnbs and Verbos, et cetera, could they be the one requesting an inspection, or would it have to be a local citizen?
It's just based on a complaint. So it would somehow, it would have to be communicated to the city.
Okay.
So that staff would process that.
Okay.
And if I may, I'd point out, in addition to what Sharon said, every day the violation exists is a separate offense. So the
okay.
fine, yeah, assuming they're found guilty, they'd be cumulative.
And I would point you to page 22 in the packet for where that is. It's an item F.
Okay, thank you.
Good discussion, good questions. Anything else? Okay.
Commissioner Aldrich?
Yeah, I just want to revert back a little bit to the fees, license fees, and also the insurance.
Yep.
Where'd you come up with those figures? They just seem a little light to me.
Okay. We were charged with coming up with a fee that allowed for the short-term rental program to fund itself. Likewise, we were also charged with not creating something that generated more fees than were necessary. And so that's how we have arrived at the 225 is based on an estimate for how much it would cost to hire a part-time person to process the applications and do the enforcement, as well as what it would cost for the equipment for them to do that job. Also, what it would cost to do to hire or contract with an organization to monitor and report violations to us of short-term rentals.
In the insurance, I just think that, $250,000 is extremely light. If, I've had people that want to rent my part of my lot for, what they call those things, fireworks. And that's $1 million policy for 3 weeks.
I believe that is based on the amount and other requirements that the city has for other programs, but I'll defer to Sharon on that one.
Let me get my unmute on here. That was, it came from a number of other city, or not state, other ordinances in other cities. And that can be whatever amount staff determines it is. I would agree $1 million would be appropriate for a fireworks stand. The city's for contract requirements is $500,000, and I think this was kind of a medium amount that staff thought was appropriate.
And that amount is listed on page 12 of the packet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. With that, I'll keep rolling then. Okay, so we're at the end of the license. I'll continue with the changes in just a moment, but the party house nuisance ordinance, This is one that the slide is very brief on it, but I would refer to the information in your packet where the proposed draft is in there. And what it does is it would pertain to gatherings of 5 or more people on a residential property. It does not need to be a short-term rental. It could be just a house that someone owns, owner occupied. It could be a long-term rental. It could be any kind of residential setting, even apartments or condos. And where 5 or more people are gathered and any one of the listed nuisance activities are taking place, and that includes property damage, littering, outdoor, using the bathroom, threatening people or property, etc., setting off fireworks, discharging firearms. If any of those are taking place, then this provides police the ability to order people to disperse immediately. So there's not a warrant, they just show up and they can order them to disperse.
Is noise one of those nuisances, or is that under the separate noise ordinance?
Yes, noise is one of the nuisances.
And that is on page 29 and 30 of the packet.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, noise is number 2. It's a violation of the city noise, of the chapter, relevant chapter of the city code. Okay, so not seeing any questions on that. I'm gonna switch over to the handout, the 2-page, 1-page double-sided handout, where we talk about the changes that have occurred since the last meeting. And again, this is largely based on public input and comments that we received from the last meeting. So the first bullet point is that we've updated it to clarify that the responsible party is for the short-term rental should be available to come to the premises if required within 30 minutes to resolve any complaint. Again, this is put in there to establish what the expectations of responsibility are upon contact. The next one then is to clarify that it's unlawful for the owner, responsible party, or other person to violate the terms of the regulation. That was just inserted to add additional clarity. The next bullet point updated that there would be a 30-day notice if there's a violation, that they would have 30 days to bring it in compliance. And that matches up with the way that we currently operate zoning issues, so it's consistent with that. The next bullet point on the first bullet point on the following page, we updated it to remove the requirement for notice to the adjacent property owners. Again, that notice we've talked about for zoning still applies, but not for the license. Second bullet point is that liability insurance can be obtained through a third party or booking platform. So if they acquire that through Airbnb or another booking platform, that works for the liability insurance. The fourth bullet point is that there's a requirement in the licensing for a diagram that shows the rooms, essentially what the layout is of the structure. That does not need to be done by an engineer. In fact, there are diagrams of structures that we can get from the appraiser's office, which should satisfy that. The individual can draw it up, but we would really we'd like to see that scaled so that we know what kind of dimensions we're dealing with. But an engineer does not need to sign off on it or do it. The fourth one is we remove the requirement for a social security number on the permit application or license application. We do require a birth date, just in case we have folks with the same names, like John Smith, for instance. That way we have a unique identifier in addition to that. And then the last one, we updated it so that if there's an internal inspection that will be done, we'll provide 72-hour notice. This is for standard issues. This is not for something that's life-threatening or an immediate concern. The city has the right to go in and address that, similar as it would to owner-occupied house. But for the purpose of a short-term rental violation, it'd be 72-hour notice for an internal inspection, prior to an internal inspection. And that is a general list of the changes. Let's see, before I conclude the staff presentation, I wonder if there are things Sharon, I'm gonna check with you and see if there's anything that I missed.
I think you have covered everything.
Okay, thank you. I'll also check with JR and Jeff. Anything additional?
No, I think not.
Okay, I will add that there's a 12-month period for folks to come into compliance with this. We have talked about that being a grace period for ones that are currently in operation. And, oh, the other thing too is that is the clarification. On this packet, on page 27, there is a typo, and that is a carryover from a prior version. On page 27, it says that they would have 6 months to come into compliance. That should be 12 months to come into compliance for the licensing.
Scott, did
Yes,
you
sir.
mention that the party house ordinance is really separate from the STRs?
It is, yes, good clarification. It's a separate ordinance, so, and it applies to any residential property. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Questions?
Do we need,
We need to vote if we want to recommend that these things are,
I make the motion we move to accept.
per staff comments on these changes. We have a motion and a second. We call. Did you have a comment, JR? I see the ayes.
Yeah, just a question. Who was
Yes.
the second?
Commissioner Duell, sorry. All in favor of approving or recommending that the MAPC recommend to the City Council approval of the municipal code changes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Recommendation to the City Council moves forward 12-0. 12. We still have 12. Thank you for your participation in this long meeting. Yeah, I'm concerned about it too. But if we're watching it very closely, we can change it quickly. Oh, the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you for your participation.